في أكبر الكتب.
Congratulations, you have found the Lambcast, the official podcast of the large association of movie blogs, also known as the Lamb. The Lamb is the largest collective of online movie blogs and podcasts with 2,000 members and counting. Every week on the Lambcast, various members of the Lamb community get together to talk about our favorite subject, movies. So bookmark the Lamb and follow us on social media. Be sure to join us each week to hear a lively discussion of films and movie-related talk from our members. Join the flock at largeassmovieblogs.com.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the year 1971. Table tennis diplomacy helped start thawing relationship between the People's Republic of China and the United States. Disney World opens in Florida. The first Starbucks opened. The last Ed Sullivan Show played. Switzerland holds a referendum and gives women the right to vote. An earthquake in San Fernando Valley kills 64 people. Great Britain starts using the decimal currency system, abandoning pence and shilling system that had been in place for 1,200 years. Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev dies at the age of 77, and D.B. Cooper carries out the only unsolved hijacking of a commercial jet. And there are a whole bunch of great movies released. This week on the Lambcast, we travel back to 1971. Not to visit the new Magic Kingdom or to order a cup of coffee at the first Starbucks, but to celebrate the movies that came out in that tumultuous year. Welcome, I'm your host Richard Kirkham of Kirkham A Movie A Day. We have a full show this week with 4 guests and your host, all bringing 5 films from 1971 to talk about. Some people have themes to their lists, some are just random. Whichever it turned out to be, start making your own lists and adding any of these films to that list. Howard Kasner from Pop Art is one person in our group who I know remembers 1971 firsthand. Welcome, Howard.
Oh, yeah. I hate to break to you, but I swear I saw news programs where they think they found D.B. Cooper.
There's
just
always
last year or 2 years ago.
Everybody
it was Loki. It was Loki.
That's it. That's it. I've seen that story every year for 20 years. Well, we finally solved it. No, we haven't. Dave Anderson from Free Kittens Movie Guide was around in 1971, I think, but he was so young his memory of the year may be fuzzy. You know, like a Maine Coon.
Yeah, it is a little bit fuzzy. And I've actually been to the first Starbucks.
There you go.
It's up in Seattle.
The Vern from Cinema Recall does just that with 1971, although his memories are at best implanted.
Yes, very, very much so. In 1971, I think my parents just met, or they're about to be married, because my sister was born in 72, so I was just a thought in the brain right there.
So you weren't even a gleam in your father's eye yet.
Not really. At that moment, no.
And finally, Todd Liebenau's memories of 1971 are largely forgotten, apropos for the creator of Forgotten Filmcast.
Yeah, I was born in 71, so I'm glad to be on this show to at least celebrate that year of my birth. You know, it's great for other reasons, not just the fact that you now have me. So.
Well, I'll tell you, when I picked the list, when I picked the number of the year that we were going to be talking about, I thought, well, I remember a few films from 71. And I was trying to remember the films that were nominated for Best Picture. And I said, oh, that was an okay year. And that was the Billy Jack year. I said, was there anything else that was good? And then I looked at the list. And I went, holy criminy, I've seen all of these movies. There's a lot of good stuff here. Yeah, I'm very pleased that this is the year because I think there's a lot of stuff here that we're going to have fun talking about. Well, Dave Anderson, you're going to be up first. So what do you got for us first? And do you have a theme that you went with on films?
Sort of a theme. My list consists of 5 movies I wish I could see on the big screen. 3 of them I never got to see in a theater, and 2 of them I saw when I was so young that I only remember bits and pieces of them, at least until I saw them later in life. And my first film, probably one of the more obvious choices from 1971, is A Clockwork Orange.
Nice.
It's one of Stanley Kubrick's masterpieces, of course. And I first watched this way too young, back when home video was first becoming a thing. And me and a few buddies rented it from the only video store in town that had a massive selection of 100 movies.
I remember those days.
Yeah. And my friends, they wanted to rent some horror movie, but I convinced them that A Clockwork Orange was supposed to be this brutal, controversial flick that could be a lot of fun. But the only reason I knew about the movie was because of good old Mad Magazine. And I remember Mad Magazine, and I loved it in the 70s. It was my first introduction to the concept of satire. It was where I first heard of movies like Death Wish and The Godfather and The French Connection. And I read it from probably 10 years old till I was around 17 or 18. And I often judged the overall importance of a film based on whether or not it was worthy of satire in Mad Magazine. And so they did a satire of A Clockwork Orange called A Clockwork Lemon. And even though I hadn't...
Sorry. I love Mad Magazine for doing that. I gotta find that issue. That's too cool.
Yeah, I found an old issue at an antique store, and I snapped that right up.
Sure.
And even though I hadn't seen the movie yet, I remember thinking the satire was very funny. And so it was because of Mad Magazine that when I saw Clockwork Orange for the first time, I understood it was intended as social commentary with themes beneath the surface, because Mad Magazine was also poking fun at some of Kubrick's artier intentions. And I guess it was sort of because of Mad Magazine that I learned that some movies were trying to accomplish more than simply telling a story. And if it weren't for that, my dumbass teenage self watching the movie probably would have seen it as just a gang picture with classical music and a mean streak.
Sure.
My two buddies who watched it with me, they got bored. I think one of them even fell asleep, except for the fighting and the rape scenes. But I thought the movie was pretty fascinating. And even though I'd seen 2001 before, Clockwork Orange was the movie that got me to pay more attention to Stanley Kubrick. It's not my favorite Kubrick film, but it's still one of his masterpieces, and it's number 84 on my personal top 100 list. And even though my wife hates it when I rewatch it, I still enjoy it from time to time. But I'm pretty sure that if I ever get a chance to see it in the theater, I'm going to be going alone.
Well, I got this right now, Dave. You should come to Minnesota, because I've got to see A Clockwork Orange twice on the big screen in 35 millimeter. Both the Trilon and the Parkway Theater show this movie in theaters. So come on down to Minnesota. It'll play here.
Yeah, I saw it last
worth the
summer
drive.
on the big screen too here at the Paramount. And we've got a shared experience here because my late wife hated this film. I mean, I would watch it, and she said, "You were putting that. I'm going in the other room. I will see you later." And that was.
Oh my God, that's verbatim what my wife says.
Yeah. So there may be something about it that appeals to film nerd guys and not to normal women who just go, "This is a turnoff for them." And I can understand maybe some of the themes there that would produce that sort of attitude.
Yeah.
This is a film that I actually couldn't see when I was 13 that year, and I couldn't get in. I wanted to see it, so I did a workaround. I bought the book.
Which has a different ending.
It does have a different ending.
Yeah.
But
and the book is a challenging read too.
Yeah.
This is a rare case where I've read the book before I saw the movie, I mean, with the whole kind of language all its own that Anthony Burgess creates, you kind of start and stop and go back and what did I just read? What does that mean? And all that kind of stuff. It's a tough book to read.
Hey, the paperback I had a glossary in the back.
I read it too, and mine did have a glossary as well. That helped out a lot when I was reading the book.
What's kind of cool about the movie is, because Kubrick utilizes a lot of the terms that Burgess did, but you didn't really need a glossary to understand what they were talking about.
No.
You couldn't say that for movies like Dune.
Which also, by the way, the movie had a glossary.
Yeah. Forgetting that people can't read the goddamn thing in the dark.
I have mixed feelings about the movie. I didn't really care for it very much when it opened up, and the reason is something that you'll all scream at me about. I thought Malcolm McDowell was not only way too old at 28 to play a 17 or 16-year-old, and I just don't think he was very good. But the more I've seen it, the more I've grown to like it, and I can sort of ignore that I don't like Malcolm McDowell in it and appreciate everything that goes around. The one thing that always struck me when I first saw it, though, was this idea that the priest says, if you take away free will, I mean, if you take away the ability to commit evil, then you take away free will, and if you take away free will, then you're no longer a human being.
That's the
Sort of
strongest
was
theme of the movie.
Yep.
Yeah.
message of the movie.
Well, Howard, do you have a different movie with a message for us?
Oh yes, yes. I
And
did the usual that
and
I
do you have a
usually
theme?
do.
These are just your best films?
Best films. That's what I usually. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's that. So I will start out with Macbeth, which is
Is this the Polanski
Roman
film?
Polanski's, violent and bloody version of one of Shakespeare's most violent and bloody plays. We all know it's about the Scottish Dane Macbeth who helps put down a rebellion. But when three witches tell him he'll become king and his wife take the prophecy seriously and assassinate their ruler. And this was, even for Macbeth, this was pretty bloody and pretty violent. And it was a reflection of the violence at the time with the Vietnam War and the assassinations and the distrust of government. I loved it. I've seen it twice or so since then. And just see if it holds up, and I think it holds up as one of Polanski's best. And remember, when you're in a live theater building, it's a Scottish play. Do not say Macbeth.
I was just going to say, don't we refer to it here on the podcast as the Polanski film?
Yes, that's a good idea. Yes, the Polanski film.
Because we don't want bad luck coming down on our heads. I have had the recent version with Denzel Washington and Frances McDormand recommended to me several times, and I think we are going to plan on doing a watch on these kinds of films. I forgot that Polanski had done Macbeth, and so I'm interested in catching up with that one as well. Maybe I'll do a side by side. I don't have that kind of objection to spending 6 hours with Shakespeare.
Well, there was one actually before the Denzel Washington, which I don't care for the Denzel Washington, except for the witches, but was made with Michael Fassbender, Marion Cotillard. Yes, in both versions, they're probably too young to play, because in Roman Polanski's, he chose two young people instead of, they're usually middle-aged, feel like they've been passed over, but instead Polanski used very young people. And they removed like half the play in the Fassbender film. You couldn't figure out what was going on. And, I think they have the
Damn spot.
yeah. And my friend had no idea what she was talking about because they removed half of the dialogue in the film. It's impossible to follow the plot. But
Howard,
I do recommend the one with Picard. What's his name?
Patrick Stewart.
Patrick Stewart. It is brilliant.
So Howard, just real quick question though. Did Polanski also do The Tempest? And is that Shakespeare? I thought, or Tempest?
Yeah, no, you may be thinking of Derek Yarman. He did A Tempest. That is Shakespeare.
The Tempest, okay.
And it's really good.
Okay.
It's really good.
Nice. Okay.
Well, Todd, I assume that we're not going to be doing a Shakespeare film here, but I could be wrong.
No. In fact, my first choice is probably about as far from Shakespeare as you could get. And yeah, I don't really have a theme this time. I mean, I always tend to lean towards somewhat off the beaten path. But I was just kind of going, well, what are 5 films I kind of feel like I want to talk about this time? So they're a little all over the place. But my first pick is actually an Academy Award nominated documentary, which is called On Any Sunday.
I remember that one.
This is it's directed by Bruce Brown, who's most known for making movies about surfing, primarily The Endless Summer. But this is not about surfing. This is about motorcycle racing, which is a subject I have very little interest in. I'm not a motorcycle rider. I have no desire to be a motorcycle rider. My only time riding a motorcycle was I was the passenger, and it was driving through this little Indonesian village, and I was like hanging on for dear life. But so this is about like all kinds of different styles of motorcycle racing and the people that kind of travel the circuit and compete in these things, you actually feel quite a bit smarter about this subject when it's all said and done. They really kind of do a good job of kind of showing you what the difference is in the different styles and all that kind of stuff. There's one sequence where they showed this like weird thing. You almost can't really call it a race, where they just like one at a time go driving their motorcycles up this steep hill and basically see who can make it the farthest, type of a thing. But there's lots of dramatic footage from the races. Of course, a lot of crashes, and that's all done in slow motion, that type of thing. But one of the most intriguing things about this movie is how they focus in on some of the personalities, the different people that do this for a living. They travel around, and kind of how it all works with their rankings and that type of thing. One of the guys they focus on a little bit is some guy you've probably never heard of, named Steve McQueen.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Yes, that Steve McQueen, the director of 12 Years a Slave. No, the other Steve McQueen. I guess I think his production company actually might have had something to do with this movie. And it's not like they linger on him too much. He's kind of there, but it's not like he's the focal point, which is good, because otherwise it would have just seemed like a vanity thing. He actually is a bit of a contender when it comes to these races. He's not just some celebrity jumping into it. He actually fares pretty well. So it's just an interesting look at a part of American culture that I really don't have any knowledge of, but I found it to be really, really interesting.
Very cool.
It's funny because documentaries don't usually get a regular theatrical release, but I remember in 1971 that this was playing in theaters. I didn't see it, but I had friends who went to see it because they were motorcycle guys. So, and I remembered that Steve McQueen was featured in it to some degree or other. I still didn't go to see it, but that doesn't mean that I wouldn't. I just like I said, it was not my bag, but I had friends who were into that kind of thing, and they actually saw it in the theater. So those were the days.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't just released in theaters; it was re-released in theaters, because I remember seeing that in '76 or '77.
Yeah, I think it did pretty well that year. I'd have to look and see how it measured up.
I think it's very much like a kind of a thing that people that are into this culture really look to. Much like the way that the surfers look at The Endless Summer. I think On Any Sunday is kind of that movie for the motorcycle enthusiasts.
That's probably a good way of classifying it. Well, Vern, what have you got to classify? Have you got a theme to your list?
I do. Thank you, Richard. My theme are the 5 most controversial movies of 1971. And
Well, I know what one of them is going to be.
yes, you are correct. We'll get to that later. All right, hold on there. All right. So I actually written like a small little synopsis for each little film. So at number 5, it's Harold and Maude, and I wrote Hal Ashby's comedy about a romance between a young boy, Bud Court, and a way older woman, Ruth Gordon, is controversial enough because of the age difference alone between the lead characters. But the humorous use of suicide attempts by its lead character probably has something to do with the controversy.
Oh, I'm not sure that was what.
That's not the one you were thinking of.
All right.
No,
So,
the suicide attempts are great. They're absolutely hysterical, especially with
funny.
his mother coming by and saying, "Oh, Harold."
but it's probably the humorous look at suicide that may have caused some controversy. I've only seen the movie once, so I don't know any other controversial things besides those 2 elements.
Well, I think
and that's
it's
all I
a-
really saw
it's
when
a-
I looked at the movie.
Teenager going to bed with an octogenarian, I think, was the big controversy, as well as her suicide at the end because she was in a concentration camp.
It's such a bizarrely beautiful movie, though. I mean,
It's a good
can't
movie.
resist
It's a
it.
fun movie. Yeah.
I have
It's
friends
good.
who say it's their favorite film, and I remember, that everybody seemed to respond to it pretty well in those days. I don't think I saw it. I didn't see it in '71. I did see it years later, though.
I saw years later too, and I thought it was good. I just didn't love it, and I find it funny too that everyone gets an uproarness on like Licorice Pizza and those 2 lead characters, but they love Harold and Maude, and I'm like, she's way older than him, and it's a way younger boy and a way older woman. So all right, whatever's.
Well, it was very popular when I went to school in Austin. Every weekend, also during the week, but especially on the weekend, all these groups would show movies to raise money. Harold and
Sure.
Maude was constantly showing over and over and over again. So if you did miss it once, there are plenty of times to see it during the year.
But yeah, very nice. But yeah, that's my first controversial pick.
I like the concept of your list. That sounds like it's going to be fun. I tried to find a theme for my movies, and I couldn't. I I'm a little bit like Todd. I have no particular theme. I'm just picking movies that I want to talk about. Sometimes there's a reason that I picked the movie, but I didn't have that reason for 5 films, so it's just going to be random here. Uh,
I
and the
love it.
and the first film I'm going to talk about is probably a pretty well-known film, although it's a little bit off the beaten path, and that's Vanishing Point. You guys
Uh,
familiar with Vanishing Point?
I am not.
I am. Yeah,
Yes.
I am.
Vanishing Point is the greatest car chase movie ever. You know,
Oh,
and
okay.
it's
Well, okay. Now you mentioned about cars. I'm thinking about something else. But okay, yeah, the car one. Okay.
yeah,
Never seen it.
1971 Challenger in the movie.
Oh,
Barry Newman
death proof.
well, that's where they got the idea for that car. Yeah,
Oh,
exactly.
yeah.
You know,
Okay.
and that movie is probably, foundational for me. I'm not a car guy per se either. Like, I'm not a motorcycle guy for sure. I like cars well enough, but I had friends who were in the car culture, and 2 of them were the Mopar kinds of guys. So they all loved Chryslers, and one of them had his family had the Charger, not the Challenger, uh, which is the other car that they use in Death Proof, by the way. That's the one that stuntman Mike drives. But the Challenger, the white one that Barry Newman drives, Kowalski in the film, is great. And it's, there's not really a reason that he is racing from one place to another. I think it's Denver to San Francisco to deliver the car. It's just that he wants to do something. There are a lot of those films from the 70s and 60s where they're anti-establishment, they're outsiders. Somebody's trying to do something that would produce, uh, some sense of rebellion or anti-authoritarian attitude, and that's what's going on here. There's not really a whole reason for it, except that once the car chase starts, everybody's after him. That's great, and uh, there weren't as many helicopters in those days. There certainly wasn't GPS tracking. It's a different kind of world, and fantastically, there is a scene in the middle of the film where he encounters a woman who's riding a mini bike in the desert, and she's completely naked. And I was 13, and I thought, this is the best movie in the history of the world. This is wonderful. I'm really enjoying this. And I saw it at a drive-in with
Yeah.
the second feature was Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, which I saw for the second
Oh.
time. But it was an interesting combination, and we went with my friend's parents, but we drove 2 separate cars. So he and I sat in one car, and his parents were in the other car. So it wasn't quite as stifling as it might have been otherwise.
Oh, fun. I want to see this because I love older movies where they show car chase sequences on actual film. I have to ask you this too, Richard. Is there a lot of like back screen photography, or is it actually real
No,
cars?
it's all real cars.
It's real.
It's all
Okay,
very
nice.
real. And there's a subplot in it where there's a local disc jockey at a soul station who starts giving him information over the air about what the cops' maneuvers are, because he can hear the cops on his radio, on one of his radios, the police band, and he starts sharing information over the air with the driver, Kowalski, so that he can avoid the cops. And some people are helping him, some people are against him, and it has one of those nihilistic endings that was very typical of the 70s. But it's a film that very much has stayed in my mind over the years. There's a television remake that I never saw with Viggo Mortensen, I think, is the star of the TV film.
It's terrible.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah.
Oh, you have
It's
seen
terrible.
it, Dave, and it's not good.
Yeah.
Well,
No.
I'll
Yeah.
avoid it. I'll avoid it. I
Well,
wasn't.
this is a film. that doesn't really make a lot of sense, but you don't care because it's just so effective, and it's a really good film. It's very odd, but it's really good. But you're right, it is very nihilistic. I think sometimes I have a hard time remembering which one is Vanishing Point and which one is Tulane Blacktop, and I have to keep
I
reminding
gotcha.
myself which is which.
It's
But
okay.
I
What's
highly
really cool.
recommend this one.
What's really cool about this one is it was just before the car chase movies of the '70s started getting really slapsticky and um, with an
Yeah.
emphasis on comedy. And when I first saw this, it was a co-feature with the Gumball Rally, which is what we went there to see, which is a comedy. And so when Vanishing Point started afterwards, we were totally on board with another car chase movie. And you mentioned the ending, Richard. That was a sucker punch.
Yeah.
Uh,
Not
we
what
just
people were
left the
expecting.
theater. We just left the theater kind of quiet and somber, but it's a really effective film.
Yeah, it's very good. We're joined now by Blueprint Review's David Brook, who wasn't around in 1971, and he wasn't around when we started this episode, but that won't keep him from being a fan of films from 54 years ago. David, welcome to the show.
Hello, sorry. I must have got the times mixed up.
It's
Yeah,
all
I'm
good.
here.
It's all good. Not a problem. You made it in time, and we're just going to put you at the end of our chain. We just got started our first round sharing things.
Nice.
Do you have a theme for your 5 films?
Yeah, again, as usual, not really. My theme is basically I've gone for a world tour. I think because the early '70s were kind of big for American cinema. You kind of had the Hollywood new wave kind of new Hollywood kind of movement going on. So I've decided to move away from Hollywood and have a little bit of a world tour. So I've tried to go to a different country each time, although it's mainly Europe, to be honest.
I like that. That sounds great. So, which country are we visiting first, and which is your first film?
Right. Cool. I'm going to start I'm going to start in Italy. And I'm going to talk briefly about Sergio Martino's The Case of the Scorpion's Tail. So this is a giallo, and the giallos were in full force in 1971 in Italy, and this is the story. It begins in London, and you have a character called Lisa Baumer, and she learns that her husband has died in a freak plane accident, which it shows in probably the worst kind of most obvious model plane explosion I've ever seen in a film.
Love it.
And then she goes to Athens to collect the life insurance policy, but she discovers that others beside herself are keen to get their hands on the money and willing to kill for it. And in the meanwhile, there's a detective, Peter Lynch, played by George Hilton. Sorry, Lisa was played by Evelyn Stewart. And he arrives to investigate irregularities in the insurance claim, and it goes on from there. And this is Giallo's or Gialli, I think is the kind of
Giallo.
The plural form.
Well, the plural I think sometimes is Gialli, but I don't know. Anyway, they tend to be quite stylish affairs that kind of really ride on the murders, the kind of death scenes, the kind of ultra gory and things like that. But I found this one actually, I was more drawn to the story. It's very Hitchcock influenced. There's a really surprising twist early on, which is very psycho. It was a really good one actually. I was quite impressed. It still has some quite kind of graphic murder scenes, and you've got a black gloved kind of villain in there, like you normally get in these kind of films. But as I say, it didn't feel just like an excuse for a bunch of attractive Italian ladies to get murdered. It was actually quite an engrossing story. The final twist is quite maybe a little far fetched, but they get away with it. I think they get away with it. And so it was a really solid entry to the genre that I enjoyed a great deal.
Well, here on the Lambcast, there's always room for Giallo.
Oh, Jesus.
Dave, what's the name of this movie again? I gotta write this down.
Oh, the Case of the Scorpion's Tail.
Case of
I mean,
Scorpion's Tail.
Sometimes I think my favorite part of it is the translation of the titles.
Oh yeah, I was going to say there are usually about a dozen different titles as well. So who knows what it's called?
Which
in
are
the
often
US.
so absurd. But genre films are fun. Dario Argento is my favorite, but other people like Mario Bava better. But they often make no sense. They're really far-fetched, but they're just so much fun. And actually, sometimes they're good because they're bad. You don't watch them necessarily.
Well,
And
this is
sometimes I
quite.
think what they,
Yeah.
you know, hmm?
I was just gonna say this is quite a classy one. I said, other than that dodgy plane crash at the start, this was one of the classier efforts, and it was also one of these kind of tourism movies, if you like, where it travels to different countries around the world throughout the film.
Sort of
As I
sort of
say,
like your selection of films today.
exactly, yeah. So it fit the theme very
Travel
well.
porn.
I like it. I like it. Well, Dave Anderson, we're back around to you. What theater is it that you're looking for to fill with something really good? You know, I know you want to see it on the big screen. So what do you want to see on the big screen next?
Okay, this one's a sci-fi film from the 70s. For me, the 70s were the golden age of science fiction, at least the decade between 2001 and Star Wars. And this was the genre at its darkest, with dystopias and evil technology and civilization being collectively screwed. And more often than not, the dire consequences were largely our fault. And as much as I love Star Wars, its popularity did signal a shift to more upbeat, action-driven sci-fi. And not that I have anything against that stuff, but my favorite science fiction movies have always been the darker ones. And I think The Andromeda Strain is one of the best science fiction films from that era. And what makes it unnerving today is, despite its extraterrestrial threat, the movie seems really plausible. The satellite crashes in a small town, and it carries this lethal microscopic organism that kills everybody, save for an old man and a baby. And they're taken to an underground facility codenamed Wildfire, where a team of experts attempt to identify what they think is some kind of virus. And most of the movie takes place in this facility. The production design of this facility is pretty remarkable. And my favorite part of the movie are the steps that these scientists have to take to go to the next level, lower and lower and lower, getting increasingly more sterilized as they go down. I find that part of the movie really, really interesting. What makes this movie ominous to me, the scenario, is the crew assembled are the best in their fields, but even they're mostly dumbfounded about this virus's existence, because it's contrary to any known organism. And another thing I really like are the simple shit happens moments, where everything is nearly undone simply by one human error, or a piece of faulty machinery, or paper getting stuck in a machine where it shouldn't.
Or someone has a reaction to a blinking red light.
Yeah, the guy epileptic.
That part's really cool, because the first time I watched that, I'm just going, okay, why is she suddenly just staring? Because they don't just go right out and say what, she's, being triggered by the red light. That was a cool element to the film. I think it's the best adaptation of a Michael Crichton novel, even without dinosaurs. One thing that cracks me up today about the Andromeda Strain is that it was rated G when released, just like all the Disney movies. So, kids could see nudity and buzzard-chewed bodies and lab animals dying in agony, and wrists slit open. And
Is this in this movie?
This is in this movie, yeah.
Oh, wow. Damn. Okay. All right.
I guess G-rated movies could be pretty hardcore back then. And I never saw it in a theater. In fact, until Arrow came out with a great Blu-ray edition, I'd never really seen it uncut. But the movie's production design is really cool, and I'd like to see that on the big screen.
Well, I saw it when it came out in a theater, and I've seen it once or twice since then, but it's been 25 years since I watched it, so my memory of it is a little vague, but I do remember, like you said, that the site Wildfire is like the interesting thing in the film, plus all of the sterilization process that they have to go through. I seem to remember there's one where their skin all dried out, and they basically had to be dusted off of all of their dead skin.
It's a very enjoyable film. I like the resolution when they figured out what they have to do to stop the organism. I had read the book before I saw the movie. If it has any issues and why it's probably not held higher esteem, the actors were not A-listers, and it might have helped to have Arthur Hill's a nice guy, but he's not the most exciting actor on screen. But I highly recommend it. I think it sets up a really interesting mystery, and it's very low key, but keeps you very interested throughout the whole thing.
Was James Olsen in the film also?
Yeah.
James Olsen, Kate Reed, and
Arthur Hill and James Olsen are like two guys that were in movies and TV shows, and I swear they were every week there was a television show that one or the other of them was in.
I'm sure they've all done a Columbo episode at one time.
Well, Howard,
great agents.
Howard, what's the next best movie that you've got on your list?
Okay, the next one, whoops, I have to go to it. The next one then is a French film, Murmur of the Heart. It's one of my top 5 coming-of-age films. In France, the youngest boy of a group of rather rebellious brothers of an upper-middle-class family, he's trying to find his way in life, especially in the area of sex. It's a rather episodic movie. It doesn't have like a strong narrative drive, but I found the character and his adventures really fascinating, from his brothers taking him to a bordello, to his adventures at school, and his being taken to a spa because he has a heart murmur. And this leads to his mother taking perhaps too strong an interest in him. But you know what they say, vice is nice, but incest is best.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah.
So, Vern, is this going to appear on your list of controversial films?
I've never heard of this movie before until Howard just mentioned it right now. No,
now you can't wait to see it and put it on your list.
Oh, sure, totally.
That's okay.
It's perhaps Louis Malle's greatest film. It was, it was very well received at the time. So, yeah.
I would give everything a shot. So, yeah, why not?
This is on my to-watch list for this show, actually, but I chose some other films instead. I was close to watching it, but it sounds like I should check it out, definitely.
Yeah.
We did cover it on Pop Art, the podcast. We put it with Almost Famous, about 2 teenagers and their relationship with their mothers.
Okay.
A little bit different, but I like that. That's interesting.
Very different relationship.
Yeah.
Todd, you have no theme, so you could go anywhere. Where are we going next?
Well, I'm going to go with something a little bit lighter here, a comedy. The only feature film directed by TV producer Norman Lear, Cold Turkey.
Cold Turkey, yeah.
Oh, that's a fun movie.
It was, I actually filmed a few years earlier, I think 69, but sat on the shelf for a few years because the studio was not very confident in it. But I think it's a pretty wild satire that, it's very much of its time, but it still holds up very well today. The basic premise is that a tobacco company has launched a publicity stunt where they're offering $25 million tax-free to any American town where the entire population can quit smoking for a month. And so this small town in Iowa takes the challenge, kind of spearheaded by the local preacher played by Dick Van Dyke. And the film is basically following the townsfolk through their frustrations as they struggle to not smoke, and then also the cigarette companies as they are doing everything they can to make sure that the town fails in this endeavor. So, I mean, like I said, it's very much of its time. I think that, we definitely have kind of different attitudes towards smoking these days, but I still think it plays very well today. It's still a very, very funny movie. Dick Van Dyke is great in the lead role. It's maybe a bit edgier type of thing than we expect from him. This is definitely not the Disney Dick Van Dyke type of thing. But he's surrounded by a really great cast. I mean, the cast is huge, but a bunch of familiar faces as standouts like Bob Newhart and Gene Stapleton, Vincent Gardenia, Tom Poston, a bunch of folks that you would see on like Norman Lear TV shows in the years to come as the 70s continued. But it's very clever, very insightful, a little over the top and crazy, but I had a great time when I watched this film a year or so ago. And it's Randy Newman's first soundtrack, so that's a good thing too.
Was this like a TV movie or like?
No,
No,
this is a
no.
feature film.
Oh, okay, fair enough. Okay, yeah. I never heard of this movie before. So.
Dick Van Dyke did try on occasion to expand his repertoire outside of TV and Disney, and he did things like Divorce American Style and The Comic, which may be his best performance of all time. The one scene I always remember for this, for some reason, is one of the compensations if you don't have smoking is you have sex.
Right.
And Dick Van Dyke is leaving the house, and then all of a sudden he starts getting really frustrated because he can't have a cigarette, and he turns back to come home to have sex with his wife. His wife sees him approaching out the window and just bursts open her dress because she knows.
And he's the preacher too, so
Well, I saw this film in 1971 when it came out, and I have very little recollection of it, but it sounds like it's worth revisiting. Interestingly enough, this is the year when 1971 hit. That's the time, I think it was, the law became effective January 2nd of 1971, that cigarette ads could no longer appear on television. So it's nicely timed with the controversy. Maybe that's why it got delayed a little bit, so that they could take advantage of that. I still don't think it was a big success, but I do know that it has a good reputation because I've heard other people recommend it over the years. Cold Turkey, yes. Looking forward to it. Well, Vern, what's controversial now?
All right. Well, at number 5 was Harold and Maude. For my number 4 controversial film of 1971, I picked Dirty Harry. And I wrote Clint Eastwood's Harry Callahan as a cop who goes against the rules to capture bad guys. He abuses his power. It can even be seen as racist, homophobic, misogynist. He is the poster idol for a lot of right-wing gun nuts who went to shoot first and ask questions later.
All right. Well,
pretty accurate.
As a right-wing gun nut who wants to shoot first and ask questions later, let me tell you, this is a film that I had on my list that I was going to talk about, but then I said, I won the franchise movie of the month contest, 6 years ago, and it was the Dirty Harry franchise. So I said, I'll pick something else. But I'm glad that you picked it, Vern, because now I get to talk about it guilt-free.
Well, please do, because I've only seen this movie once, and I only saw it just like recently, like about a year or two ago, because I knew about the reputation, and I just knew about that one scene, Do You Feel Lucky Punch? And for the most part, I enjoyed it. I like the fact that Harry Callahan is a very complicated character, and you don't actually like him a lot when watching this movie. And I like characters like that on screen where you don't actually like their actions so much, but they're just fascinating characters to watch. So yeah.
Well, I've seen this movie. Go ahead, Howard.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say
what I find. Go ahead.
Okay, I was just going to say I've seen this movie in a theater, I think, every year the last 3 years.
Nice.
I think there was an Alamo screening. It was at TCM a couple of years ago, and it played at the Paramount last year. And whenever it's on a big screen, I'm going to go see it. But I don't have to wait that long because I watch it probably at least once a year and maybe twice a year. This is one of my favorite Clint Eastwood films. I think it works really well. I remember the time period. I mentioned to you also that there were reasons some films stood out. This is the first R-rated film I saw, and my older brother took me to see it so I could see it because I wanted to see it so badly. And so they weren't all G-rated there, Dave.
But I think what makes it controversial is the use of that character, and that's what put on the list. Now it can be seen as problematic.
In the political realm, it was. I think that Pauline Kael referred to it as a fascist film. It was controversial at the time because it took a different perspective. It was certainly a much more. It went against the grain of the culture at the time, and it certainly appealed to people who were, law and order type voters who said, things have swung too far in the other direction. By the way, I saw a film yesterday with a very interesting similar theme, Locked, with Anthony Hopkins and Bill Skarsgård, and it's actually mostly Bill Skarsgård trapped in a car for an hour and a half.
Okay.
But Anthony Hopkins sounds like he could be Harry Callahan from 1971.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I must
I'm
admit, I'm a big Dirty Harry fan as well. I've seen it quite a few times, and my favourite screening though has to be I went to the Cannes Film Festival in 2008, I think it was, and Clint Eastwood presented an outdoor beach screening of Dirty Harry.
Fun.
Which was awesome, and I got to meet him. It wasn't like I shook his hand and said hello to him, but I saw Clint Eastwood twice that week, like once at that screening and once I went to watch Santa Sangre, and he walked out of the cinema from the film prior to mine, just kind of walked right past me, which was really freaky. So I love Dirty Harry. I'm with Richard on this one.
Clint
It's a
Eastwood
great
went and watched
movie.
Santa Sangre.
No, he came out of the cinema when I was going to watch Santa Sangre. He was coming out of whatever, I don't know what it was. Although in my screening of Santa Sangre, there was Nick Nolte was there, sat just 2 rows in front of me, which is kind of weird.
Oh, that's crazy. Oh, that's very cool. I love that.
That was cool.
But yeah, Richard,
Yes.
what do you have for your?
Yeah. Thank you for transitioning for me. I appreciate that. I was going to get there. I was going to get there. In 1971, I spent the summer living in Lake Gregory, California, which is a resort town in the mountains in Southern California. My family was putting on a show for this summer. We'd leased a tent. We had an evening magic show that was going on, and so I spent the summer up there working in the show. And there was a one-screen theater in the town that had a different movie every week. And one of the weeks that I was there, I went to the movies and saw The Summer of '42, which is again another coming-of-age movie. Similar to Howard's Murmur of the Heart, but there's no mother fixation in this. The Summer of '42 is a story about teenagers who, the war has started. They're on the cusp of being, they're in high school at the time. They're probably sophomores in high school in 1942, and they spend the summers at the beach with their families, and one of them falls in love with a woman who is married to a soldier who's gone off to war, and he kind of dreams about her, and he manages to meet her and become friends with her, and there's kind of a poignant romantic element to it when it comes up. And the music to this movie is fantastic. It won the Academy Award for Best Score. It's terrific music, and it's very memorable. And Jennifer O'Neill, if she's never remembered for anything else, although she should be remembered for Scanners, she was perfect casting in this. She's luminous, and it's worth watching the movie just to watch her in a sundress on the beach in 1942. And the clothing styles are all very accurate. Maybe I'm a little bit influenced by it because this is my parents. My dad could have been one of these teenage kids. They're the same age. They're going to go to war if the war lasts long enough, but they're just on the outside of it, and so it's just one of those things where things are it's different. When I was in college, I participated in a speech tournament where we did oral interpretation, dual interp. So we did an interp with another person, and my debate partner and I, as a lark, decided that we would enter, because we were not oral interp people at all. We were debaters. We kind of looked down on that sort of stuff. But as a lark, we decided that we would do something, and so we did the Summer of '42, and we did the sequences that involved them trying to obtain condoms at the pharmacy store, and then distributing the condoms between each other on the beach, and it was a lot of fun. It's a very funny movie too.
The only thing I know about this movie, Richard, and tell me if I'm wrong, but I think this is the movie that Wendy and Danny are watching in The Shining in that sequence in the hotel room.
Yeah,
maybe a different movie.
No, I think you're right.
It is.
I think you're
It
right.
is. Okay, that's the only connection I have to this movie is that the movie that they're watching in the living room area.
Wasn't
Yeah.
there a sequel?
Yes, The Class of 44, which is not as good, but it has its charms.
Well, remember, in every boy's life,
There's a summer of
there's
40.
a summer of 42. And I have the deed to the Brooklyn Bridge. But anyway.
David, we're back around to you. Where are we visiting next?
Right. Well, next we are going to go to Germany. So for this I cracked open a Werner Herzog box set that I've had on my shelf for a while, because he directed 3 documentaries that were released in 1971. He directed Fata Morgana and The Land of Silence of Darkness. But then I went for the lesser known shorter. I don't know whether it's a short film or feature. It's 45 minutes, which is kind of a short film, but kind of long for a short film. It's an unusual length. But yeah, that film was called Handicapped Future, or in German, Behinderte Zukunft, something like that. And it's quite a straightforward film, really. It's basically showing the way that physically disabled people, but particularly children, were treated, how they were treated in West Germany around the kind of late 60s and early 70s. And in this kind of latter portion of the film, he goes to America and kind of shows the difference between someone in America dealing with disability. But it seems a little unfair because in America it's an adult, a young adult, rather than the German side is children. So it doesn't quite match perfectly, but it's interesting. But I found it quite a powerful film. As I say, it's quite pretty straightforward, kind of fly on the wall kind of thing. Well, it has interviews too. But what really struck me was it has some really wonderful observations of the life of these children. It just kind of, as I say, just watches them doing their thing in their daily lives, and it's poignant without kind of tear jerking. Like, you see them just, as I say, it's not milking it for sympathy as much as you might think from hearing what the synopsis is. These kids are just going for it. They've always been like that, and they're just dealing with it. And it's quite inspiring to watch them sometimes, even though, as I say, the film does deal with how they feel the German government is letting them down and just kind of casting them aside. Like, they speak to some of the neighbours and things like that, and although they're kids, they're kind of able-bodied kids, just treat them like any other kids. You find that some of the adults kind of hide them away a little bit, and in that time in Germany, they just kind of they hid them in a special school away from everyone else, and and that's what the film's really dealing with. But as I say, what I found most powerful about the film was the beautiful observations of their lives. So I liked it a great deal. And as I say, this is a bit of an earlier. Well, Herzog had been making films short films since the early 60s. So he'd been doing it for a while, but he hadn't really got big yet. Land of Silence of Darkness, released the same year, I think was very highly regarded. But Aguirre, Wrath of God, which is kind of, and The Enigma of Caspar Hauser, the kind of the bigger films, they were just about to come, like in the following year or two. So yeah, I found it interesting to see this early-ish film from the director.
It sounds like a definite time capsule piece.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was interesting when they moved to America, because there's this American student that they speak to. He has all these he has loads of gadgets and gizmos to help him kind of lead a normal life, and it's kind of fascinating to see the technology they had then in the early 70s. And it was a really good film. As I say, nice and short, so it was just one I quickly kind of shoved on. I realised I've got a spare hour and just popped it on. So it's well worth checking out.
Good deal.
Very cool.
Dave Anderson, I wish I could see something on a big screen with you. What is it that we should go and see?
Oh, I think we should see THX 1138. This is George Lucas's first movie.
I thought you might come up with that.
This is George Lucas's first movie back when he was still not known to anybody except Francis Ford Coppola, who helped him out with the backing for this. He expanded his student film into a feature length. And of the 5 films Lucas actually directed, this is the only one that was a box office failure. Of course, it's got a cult following now. It never got a sequel, and it's kind of easy to see why. I'm also increasingly convinced Lucas got considerable creative help with LSD. This is a weird ass movie to me, and it feels like he was sometimes making up the story as he goes along. He's got some interesting ideas that are stitched together by confusing plot turns, and the dialogue is sometimes clunky. And based on some of the narrative direction, I think the story was driven by the locations and props he was able to get a hold of at the time. And the film is never as profound as he obviously intends it to be. Still, his depiction of a dystopian 25th century is visually impressive, especially for a movie that didn't even cost $1 million to make. I do love how this movie looks and sounds. I love the stark minimalist atmosphere. I love the cinematography and the set and costume design. And my favorite part, at least when I was a kid, was the extended chase scene during the climax through these underground tunnels. It's a pretty convincing depiction of a future with limited resources, and all of which makes it look like a bigger movie than it really is. And with post Star Wars hindsight, it's interesting to see a guy like George Lucas forced to work within the limitations of a really tiny budget. Years later, as he was prone to do, he eventually went back and tweaked with the movie, adding digital effects and restoring some of the sex and nudity that was cut from the theatrical version. And like his Star Wars special editions, these upgrades don't make it a better film, and the digital enhancements are a little bit too conspicuous. And it's a cold, emotionally aloof movie, but it's fascinating just to look at, and I think the chance to see it on a big screen would be an enjoyable experience.
I agree with that, seeing that on the big screen, Dave. The only connection I have to this movie is with an album, Nine Inch Nails' The Downward Spiral. The opening track uses a sample from this movie for the first track, and that's the only connection I have. I have seen this once, and it was the director's cut version, and I was very surprised about a guy who did Star Wars, all the vast landscapes, did something very minuscule and tiny in budget. Because this was made even before American Graffiti, and I liked what he did with the sets. I liked that police officer with like that clear face type of thing that always had an image in my mind for this movie. So yeah, I would like to rewatch this, but I agree, a theater needs to put this out on the big screen for me to admire it more.
Howard, we're still looking for the best films, so you got another one that's a candidate?
Yes, my next one will be a British film. It's Sunday, Bloody Sunday. Originally called, I think, Bloody Sunday in England, but they changed the name for America because Bloody Sunday wouldn't mean anything in the U.S. or they would misinterpret it.
Plus, they had to put that U2 song in there too. That U2 song at the credits. So
there actually isn't a famous event in England that is called Bloody Sunday as well, but it's directed by John Schlesinger and written by Penelope Gilliatt, and it's the study of a frustrated office worker, a doctor, and the young man who goes back and forth between them. And I was lucky in that this was perhaps the first gay film I ever saw, and it treats the gay aspects as everyday, as very normal. There's a kiss between the two men that's not presented in a shocking way, and while other people might have been a little uneasy, I was going, that's interesting. So it's brilliantly written and has some of the best acting of the year by Oscar nominees Glenda Jackson and Peter Finch, and it also stars singer Murray Head.
Peter Finch, well, okay, all right. I had no idea who was in that.
Murray Head, Jesus Christ Superstar, and One Night in Bangkok.
One Night in Bangkok.
Oh,
Right.
That's the guy from that song? Okay, wow, I did not know that. Okay, very cool.
And Glenda Jackson, she's one of the best actresses in British history. She's she's not as popular maybe she used to be, but yeah, she was always very highly regarded. She died quite recently, didn't she?
A year or
2023,
two ago.
yeah.
I think one of the reasons why she's not as popular is she took time off.
Yeah, she worked a lot in theatre, I
politics.
think, as well, rather than film. But...
Yeah, she went into politics for a long time, and then when she came out of politics, she couldn't quite grab the audience. like she did before. And I think, did a lot of stage. She did The Tempest, I think. And she played the Prospero.
Well, Todd, you don't have a theme, so you could be going anywhere. Where did you decide to go next?
Well, we're actually, like David, going to go to a different part of the country. I don't know. Maybe he's got this on his list. I don't know. But we're going to go to Australia for Nicholas Roeg's Walkabout.
All right.
Which it's his second directorial feature. The story, a very simple story. It follows a teenage girl played by Jenny Agutter and her younger brother, who's played by Roeg's own son Luke, and the setup is dark. I mean, they go to the outback with their father for a picnic, but the father tries to murder them, and they escape. The father then ends up killing himself. The car is torched and such, so now they're left to wander the outback alone, try to get back to civilization. They end up meeting an Aboriginal boy along the way, played by David. I'm going to mess up his name. Gulpilil. You recognize his face. He's in lots of Australian productions, but he's out on Walkabout himself. He does not speak English, but the three kind of form a bond as they learn to depend on each other and kind of go on this journey together. Like I said, it's a very simple story, but it's just so engaging. I mean, some of it is delightful and charming. There's other parts of it that are dark and scary. I'm one of those people that, anytime you have a movie that's got a slightly sinister angle to it that's in the Australian outback, that's just one of the scariest things to me. It's like that place will kill you in a heartbeat, type of thing. This film is just it's captivating. It's beautifully shot. Jenny Agutter was only 16 at the time she made this, but it's just a really great performance. I suppose some people might find the little kid annoying, but I was kind of charmed by him. And David Gallopolo also just a really great performance. So yeah, this one is, a kind of simple, quiet kind of movie, but very engaging.
Looks stunning as
you
well.
have me at Jenny Agutter because I loved her in Logan's Run, so I'll get to another movie. Sure.
Yeah, I've heard about this movie for years, and I've never seen it. But I have seen pictures and clips, and it looks like it would be gorgeous. But for some reason, I've just skipped it. Now, one more recommendation to make me feel guilty when I don't watch it.
Oh, it's superb. Yeah, I love it. It's a classic.
It looks like a movie that should be on Dave Anderson's list about movies being seen on the big screen as well.
Oh, definitely.
I didn't see it on a big screen, but yes, I would imagine that it is a much more enhanced experience on the big screen.
Well, Vern, let's get controversial. What's next?
All right, Jade. Yes, number 3 on my list is The Devils. And I wrote,
I knew it.
And I wrote here, Ken Russell's very controversial tale starring Oliver Reed as an essentially active priest and a group of nuns, including Vanessa Redgrave. I imagine the images of seeing religious figures and icons used in sensual manners ruffled a lot of feathers so much we still don't have a full uncut version of this movie. And then I wrote down, recommended follow-up to this is Paul Verhoeven's Benedetta, I think.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I still have not been able to see the full uncut version of this. I know this was playing on like Shudder a few years back, and that's how I got to see the movie, and it's good. Yeah, Oliver Reed is really good, kind of like disgusting individual too, but it's a very fascinating movie. Only seen it once, and I would like to see the full uncut version.
Yeah, I reviewed it a while back. I've not seen it for a while to talk about the details too much, but I can remember it impressing me way more than I expected. I kind of watched it for the notoriety of it all, but I was just impressed by how it's visually absolutely stunning. It's a really powerful film.
It's a good story
it's
too.
The same way with me. It showed up on the Criterion Channel for a very limited time a year or two ago, and I was kind of like, well, it's hard to run across copies of this movie. I should watch it while I have the chance.
Yeah.
And I was kind of, had a certain image in my mind because of the, the controversy or, the fact that it is hard to find and all that stuff. And I was just like, wow, that's a really good movie. It exceeded my expectations for sure. I figured it was a movie that was kind of getting by on the controversy, but that's not the case.
I thought it would be like Caligula and just be just like that, but it wasn't. And I've not seen Caligula, and there's like different versions of Caligula. There's like a new like final cut of Caligula that was in theaters that I should seek out. So I'm hoping that the Devils would get an Arrow 4K release with all the different versions and cuts with it.
Well, we covered The Devils as a movie of the
yeah.
month. I think, was that 4 years ago, 5 years
Oh.
ago?
I don't know. I remember. And I was the outlier because I don't like the film. I think Vanessa Redgrave is brilliant. I think Oliver Reed is absolutely a terrible actor. And everybody's getting so controversial and shocked, and they're shocked. I'm going, that's about as shocking as an afternoon tea. I never understood why people thought this was so shocking, because I'm going, this isn't shocking at all. This is someone trying to be shocking, but doesn't know how to be. It's
Ken
like
Russell?
a child.
Ken Russell trying to be shocking? Imagine that.
And I'm just rolling my eyes at this, going, "Are you kidding?
Well,
This isn't shocking."
I remember when it came up, and I was going, okay, well, how do I see this? I had to buy an out-of-print DVD to be able to see it, and I think I paid $35 or $40 for it, so I could include it on the show because I hadn't seen it. And so, Vern, when you say it's hard to find, I know that was true. It's probably a little bit easier to find now, but whatever it was 4 or 5 years ago when we were doing the show, it was next to impossible to find. So
And I know like a lot of like religious groups and things like that, protest the film. And like I said before, we still don't have a full uncut version of the movie that has been made, but it's been edited down so many times, and that's why it still remains controversial, the fact that a lot of studios have not been able to release a full uncut version of the movie. So.
And of course, Space Jam 2 exists in the same universe because the nuns from the Devils show up in the crowd in Space Jam 2.
That is funny.
Which is a terrible movie.
That is hilarious that does. Oh, but Richard, what do you have for a much more uplifting movie than I did?
Well, I don't know that it's uplifting, but it is a Western, and I like that. I had a choice this year of two Strother Martin films, and one of them I had talked about with Todd, I don't know, a year or two ago, and I said, let's do something different. And so this is my other Strother Martin film from 1971, Hanny Calder.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Which is a Western starring Robert Culp and Raquel Welch. Raquel Welch is a woman who's assaulted by three vile criminals in the Old West, and she comes across Robert Culp, who is kind of a bounty hunter type, and he helps her get back on her feet and takes her down to Mexico, where they encounter Christopher Lee, his only Western, who is a gunsmith, and he teaches her how to shoot and how to carry herself, and she follows his lead, and then she goes on the revenge trail for the three guys that murdered her husband, burned down her ranch, raped her, and generally, deserve whatever's coming to them. And those three guys are Ernest Borgnine,
Jack Elam.
Thank you. Sometimes you just get that blank spot there, and there it was right there. Jack Elam and Strother Martin. And,
I mean, talk about a trio.
Yes.
I mean, come on.
You get two of the greatest character actors in the world with the greatest main star who was a character actor playing brothers in this film who are just vile, evil people, and and Raquel Welch is after them, and one by one she finds them, and they get their comeuppance.
And she's great in this too.
She is really good.
She looks really good in a poncho too.
I was just going to say, those of you who haven't been watching the video version of the podcast, be sure you tune in this week, because I've got a couple of nice clips that I'm going to include in the video for you, and you'll thank me.
I watched this. I reviewed it as well not too long ago. I enjoyed this. The only thing I found a little bit is, although, as you say, the kind of the trio of bad guys, amazing cast, I did find their characters are played a little too much like comic relief in the film, considering they're the ones that kind of raped her and all this kind of stuff. That is the only thing. It didn't settle well for me. I think some of the comedy could have been toned down a bit, undermined their presence evil raping bad guys. But otherwise, yeah, I really enjoyed this. Is it fun little gem. And isn't it like British? I was like, it's a really unusual Western. It's like a UK Spanish co-production, which is very unusual for. Well, you do a lot of Westerns in Spain, but not many British Westerns.
It's a pretty underappreciated performance by Culp too. Who, never made a huge impression on me, but I remember seeing this and thinking he was really good in this.
Yeah, I don't think anybody was bad in it. I think it's just one of those things that it was of its time. It was sort of like a spaghetti Western, only it's, more like a, I don't know what you would say, beans and eggs Western.
Paella Western, I guess, because it's part Spanish.
And if it were made today, people would be screaming woke.
Oh, yeah, it would just
be... I feel like that annoying little brother that's looking at what their older brothers are watching. Like, what are you watching? What are you watching? Go away, Bird. You're too young for this. All right? You can't watch it with us. I want to see what you're watching. No, go away. All right? You'll see when you're older.
Well, David's old enough to tell us where he's going next, so where are we headed?
Well, I'm heading back home for a spell, just for a breather before I head back out again, and I'm going to look at what Hammer Studios are doing, because the Hammer horror kind of cycle was just kind of drifting away by 71, but they were still producing a few gems.
There's a couple in 71 though.
Yeah, well, I must admit I haven't actually seen that many Hammer horror films. I'm ashamed to say, being a Brit. I don't know. I've never been a huge horror guy, but I did go and watch one for this podcast, and I went out and watched Twins of Evil.
I was hoping you were going to say Twins of Evil.
Yes.
Thank you.
So yeah, it's about a set of twin sisters, quite busty twin sisters, who they travel.
That's an understatement, by the way.
They travel from Venice to Karnstein in Central Europe, kind of an unnamed country in Central Europe, to live with their uncle, Gustav Weil, who's their uncle is played by the great Peter Cushing, and he's uber religious, and he goes out in the evenings with a bunch of with the Brotherhood, I think it's they're called, and he tries to find witches and kills them off without giving them much of a chance to have their say. But also in town is Count Karnstein, who I've forgotten who he's played by Damien Thomas, and he is into Satanism and black magic and all this kind of thing, but he's untouchable because he is in favor of the emperor. He kind of has the emperor's ear, so he can get away with anything. So he has all these crazy blood orgies and things like that, and jumps in the sack with everyone, all the busty maidens in town. And he has the eye. He likes the look of one of the twins and seduces her, and she's one of the twins. The twins are quite different. One of them's a bit of a goody-goody, and one of them likes to get down and dirty. And so she goes along with Count Karnstein and gets up to mischief and becomes one of his brides of Satan or whatever. And it goes on from there. And then obviously you've got Peter Cushing has to decide what to do when he realizes one of his nieces is under the influence of this evil man and is possibly a witch. And yeah. And I really enjoyed this. It's kind of generic in places. You can pretty much guess exactly what's going to happen early on in the film. But it's just decent. It's well paced. It's just a lot of fun. It's like a lot of the Hammer films. It's very handsomely mounted. The production values are there. It looks nice. It's colourful. You've got plenty of splashings of blood and gore. You've got lots of boobs. It's just an easygoing kind of like typical but successful Hammer joint. So yeah, I enjoyed it.
Sounds like Sunday afternoon to me.
This one is fun. I think this is, when you think of the different kind of eras of Hammer horror, this one kind of perfectly sums up where they were at here in the early 70s, where they've got a little bit more freedom to really kind of exploit the two B's, the blood and the boobs, I mean, and this one, like David was saying, I mean, it looks great, very colorful. It's got a unique visual style to it. Cushing is Cushing. I really like Damien Thomas as this vampire. He's just, an interesting figure. And the two twins, Madeline Collinson and Mary Collinson, actual twins, both unbelievably gorgeous. They do a great job in this film. So yeah, this one, I mean, I'm not going to say it's necessarily one of the best Hammer films, but it's a fun little romp.
Yeah, the only ones I've seen from this area, Dave, is Lust for a Vampire and The Vampire Lovers. I had no idea about Twins of Evil, but I will definitely look forward to this one.
Nice. Yeah, it's good fun. It's good fun.
Dave Anderson, is your film two Bs or not two Bs?
Well, I love thrillers from the 70s, and I decided to avoid the most obvious choice, and I went with the Anderson tapes, which is directed by Sidney Lumet, and it stars Sean Connery as a thief who's just been released from prison and plans another heist.
America, man, you know it's so beautiful. I want to eat it.
Word for word. This time, he wants to rob an entire New York City apartment building that's full of wealthy tenants. And a lot of the movie consists of Connery putting his crew together and getting financial backing from the mob and getting between the sheets with Diane Cannon, and who wouldn't. But what he doesn't realize is the police have a lot of his associates under heavy surveillance. So even though he keeps popping up on the cameras and on tape, they weren't necessarily spying on him. And the movie's got a pretty cool climactic heist sequence at the end. But my reasons for including this one over the other one are strictly personal. This was my first Sean Connery movie, even before seeing a James Bond film. And I remember my parents dragging my sister and I along with them to the drive-in to see it, I think because they couldn't find a babysitter. So this was also my first drive-in movie, which I thought was pretty cool. And my sister and I must have been pretty unruly in the back seat because I do remember my dad telling us repeatedly to shut up. But in between bickering with my sister and listening to my dad telling me to shut up, I was sort of paying attention to the movie. This was also the first movie where I saw a man and a woman naked in bed together. Well, PG naked anyway. And I immediately thought I was watching my first X-rated movie. And a couple of times during the thing, I was asking my parents, "Is this was rated X?" And I'm pretty sure Dad told me to shut up again. And I also remember one of the crew, they call him the Kid, was pretty cool because he had long hair just like the Beatles did. And his death kind of haunted me afterwards because this might have also been the first movie I saw that showed a bloody death, comparatively speaking. And
you're burying the lead there, though, Dave. The Kid is baby Christopher Walken.
That's one of his first movies. And he's actually pretty good in this.
He is.
And I didn't see it again until I eventually found it on DVD about 10 or 15 years ago. And not having seen it since that time of the drive-in, it was fun revisiting the thing. It's definitely a product of its time, especially aesthetically or some of its depictions of stereotypes. And of course, it's not nearly as violent or dirty as my 8-year-old self once thought it was. And it doesn't rank among Lumet's best films or Connery's best work, but I do have a nostalgic attachment to this. And I think it would be fun to catch it in a theater one more time with my dad, because he's still around. He probably doesn't remember regretting taking the whole family to see it, but maybe I could make it up to him by shutting up during the movie.
Well, this was on my list, and you've allowed me to substitute in a different film later on because you picked this, and I can talk about it now. This is a really fun film. You mentioned several of the things that I would have highlighted about it. Obviously, Christopher Walken is cool that he shows up. It is his first film. Sean Connery I don't think he's wearing his toque.
He's not.
And
that's
so
natural Sean.
Yeah, you get a very clear view of what he is like. And as a Sidney Lumet film, I think one of the things that's really good about this movie is it is really gritty New York kind of stuff, because you get a sense that this is real. You compare this to the heist films that are being done nowadays, and it's so different. There's a scene where one of the police officers, and I think it's played by Garrett Morris, he's climbing up the side of the building. He is not some invincible black ops guy. he's struggling with a piece of rope, basically, coming close to falling off of the building several times and sweating like a son of a gun trying to get up the building. And when they're taking some of the victims out and they're putting them in the ambulance, they had to take out like the bloody sheet before the that was there before the victim that they're bringing out. It's just like, this is a real situation. It plays like a real situation. And I think it would be an interesting companion piece with the taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3, because you've got Martin Balsam as part of the crew, but a very different character here.
Way different.
But he's part of the failure of the plot also, both times.
Okay, the fact that you compare this to the Take Up of Pelham 1, 2, 3 makes me want to watch this movie, because I'd never even heard of this movie before until you mentioned it on your list, Dave Anderson, so thank you.
Taking Up Pelham 1, 2, 3 is far better. To me, that's one of the greatest of the 70s. But it would be a fun comparison, side-by-side comparison. This one, like Taking Up Pelham 1, 2, 3, also has quite a bit of comedy that I didn't catch when I was little.
Yeah, and I remember when it was being promoted, a lot of people were focusing on the illegal taping that was taking place by the surveillance by the cops and the FBI and all that kind of thing. And this was 2 years before all of the taping stuff came out in the Watergate thing. So it was like a setup. It was the preview for that kind of stuff that was showing up. Howard, we're getting close. What are your best films that you've got on your list still?
Okay, well, the next one is a Western. I kept putting off seeing Duck You Sucker or A Fistful of Dynamite, I think because of the name. I mean, I had seen The Good, the Bad, the Ugly, and maybe I'd seen For a Few Dollars More. But the title put me off, and also the poster put me off. I thought it was going to be some silly comedy.
And had the Mad Magazine illustration on it.
Yeah, probably. And then eventually, when I saw how well respected it was, I did see it, and it's wonderful. It's definitely up there. I almost want to say it's up there with the best of Sergio Leone, but I'm not sure how many bad films he even made. So it's just up there. And it's about a Mexican bandit and an Irish revolutionary who is hiding out in Mexico, and they join forces to help in the Mexican Revolution. It stars James Coburn and Rod Steiger, and it's definitely up there when it comes to Westerns.
Absolutely.
Well, yeah, Sergio Leone didn't direct a huge number of films, and this is one of the ones that people often forget about because it could easily have been Once Upon a Time in America instead of Once Upon a Time in the West, but he was saving that title, maybe Once Upon a Time in Mexico, but somebody else used that title later on. This is a long film, but it's a good film. It's a good film, and I remember I saw it at the El Rey Theater in Alhambra on Main Street, and I remember liking it a lot. You're right. I think the title it will put people off a little bit because it sounds like it's a jokey comedy instead of a Western about revolutionaries in Mexico. Right.
And A Fistful of Dynamite makes it sound like somebody else who made a movie and is using the title to make it sound like it's a Sergio Leone film, when it's actually a Sergio Leone film.
Absolutely.
And just as a side note, I acquired this on Laserdisc 5 years ago at a pop-up Laserdisc store that showed up one time, on West Hollywood, and people were just doing this, they hadn't made any Laserdisc for 25 years, but there are still crazy people out there like me who are interested in the format, and that was one of the ones that I acquired as a result. So, it's a fun film.
I am one of those crazy people too that collect Laserdisc. Okay, so I got you, Richard.
Todd, without a theme, without any preconceptions, what's next?
Well, I was in Australia last time, and I'm going to stay in Australia for my next one, but we're going to go much darker with Wake and Fright.
Yeah.
This is another one where we've got someone stuck in the outback. This time it's Gary Bond playing a a teacher who's serving in a small town out in the outback. He hates it. He's gonna go back to Sydney for the holidays, but he's got to stop in this mining town, Bunda Yaba, I think was how they say it. They just call it the Yaba. But he ends up getting stuck there, and let's just say the locals are not pleasant guys. I mean, you kind of know that's going to be the case when one of their leaders is played by Donald Pleasance. I mean, that's just not a good place to start, is when you've got Donald Pleasance there. And Pleasance is great. Just terrifying Donald Pleasance type of thing here. This is directed by Ted Kotcheff, who he would go on to stuff like First Blood. Yay! But he would also do stuff. Well, he also did Weekend at Bernie's, which, not so good. But it's another case where this just kind of this vast, desolate Australian outback is photographed in just a beautiful way, but a much more sinister way than when we were talking about Walkabout. This is a film that just gets under your skin. I mean, this is a psychological horror film, basically. It's notorious for this sequence involving the hunting of kangaroos, which is just way too visceral to have been staged. The real deal going on here.
Yeah.
But it just really makes the outback out to be a scary place. And when you're done watching this film, you just feel dusty and dirty and grimy after watching this one. But again, just a film that just draws you in an unbelievable way.
Todd, you had me. I'm feeling dusty, dirty, and grimy after I got done watching. I thank you very much. This looks like a very comforting watch for me to check out later on.
This is not a comforting film.
All right. This sounds like a very early, like almost like Gaspar Noé type of like film and whatnot.
This is Vern's going to bed film. So
yeah, very much so.
So are you saying the kangaroo slaughter is not simulated?
I think it is probably not similar.
It's definitely not. No, I
cannot stand that crap. I will. That guarantees I will never even think about checking this one out.
Yeah, that scene is brutal, and it is definitely real. I have to say I've got the Blu-ray. They kind of talk about that, but it's pretty horrific.
Well, apparently it wasn't on Vern's list of most controversial films.
I know, right? I feel bad that not really bad. I haven't seen the movie yet, so who knows? Number 2 is a movie that Dave Anderson talked about, and that is A Clockwork Orange at my number 2 spot. And I wrote, be the adventures of a young man whose main interests include violence, rape, and Beethoven. Stanley Kubrick's adaptation of Anthony Burgess' futuristic novel about a young man who's journeying from a vicious hoodlum to a weakened device used only for political gain was met with a lot of backlash when released. Idiots took up the wrong message and started forming gangs and causing violence, and Kubrick banned the movie in the UK, and it remained that way until his death in 1999.
Yeah, and we talked about it quite a bit already, but there's, Clockwork is one of those films that is going to remain on people's lists as a controversial, even though it's, what are we, 56 years later? Not quite that many, 54 years later. It still is viewed as a controversial film.
And when I saw it in theaters a few weeks ago when the Parkway Theater was playing it, there were a few people that showed up to the movie, have never seen it before, and after that rape sequence, a few people did walk out still. So it still has the ability to shock people today.
And of course, if you guys ever wanted to know what Darth Vader looked like, he's in the movie.
Kind of a nerd.
Yeah. Hayden Christensen?
It's also a movie where they don't quite get the future right, because when she calls the police, she doesn't call 999. She actually has to look up the telephone number of the local constable.
Yeah.
But she didn't have a phallus phone, just the furniture.
No.
Well, my next film is another Western, so I have 2 Westerns on my list for, a period of time where the Westerns were disappearing. We have Duck You Sucker, Hanny Calder, and this film, which stars one of my favorite actors of the 70s, Charles Bronson, but it also stars one of my favorite actors from Japan, Tofuro Mifune, and it also stars the star of Le Samurai, Alan Deon. It's Red Sun. And then you throw in Ursula Andress on top of it, and it's pretty damn
Yeah,
good.
why not?
This is another film that was hard for me to acquire. I own it as a Blu-ray, but I think I imported it from Japan because it's not something it's out of print in English anyway. There are subtitles, but I can remove the subtitles when I'm watching it. It's a Western with a samurai.
I want to say Warner Archive maybe did a release of this, but I'm not sure.
It wouldn't surprise me. Like I said, it was years ago when I was searching it out because when my original project, when I was starting blogging, came up, I was looking for films that I could talk about that I remembered seeing from the 1970s, and this was one I tried to find and I could never find it. And then, like I said, probably, I don't know, 2011, 2012, somewhere in there, I finally just said, okay, eBay, help me. And it did. This is a Western with Charles Bronson as a train robber who happens to hold up a train carrying the new Japanese ambassador and a samurai sword that's supposed to be presented to, I think it's presented to the president as a gift from Japan. And it gets stolen by the train robbers, who include Alain de Leon and Charles Bronson. And of course, there's a betrayal. De Leon kind of leaves Bronson high and dry, and so one of the samurai that's on board the train is assigned to recover the sword, and he and Bronson have to work together. And they are accompanied by a woman who is both a lover and an antagonist at the same time, Ursula Andress, and Western adventures ensue, including samurai swords against gunfighters and gunfighters against samurai swords. It's a lot of fun.
It is a lot of fun. It's worth checking out. I mean, for a movie that was hard to find for a number of years, it's on Tubi right now.
There you go.
So,
Wouldn't that
so
be
you can
nice?
watch it there. And I'm surprised you didn't mention, Richard, it's directed by director of several of the Connery James Bond films, Terrence Young.
Oh yes, that's right. Well, I hadn't thought about that for a time, and like I said, I should have spent a little bit more time. I wish I'd watched all these movies getting ready for this show, but I've been busy.
Well, it's a very entertaining film. I'm not a big fan of Charles Bronson, but I think his westerns are underrated. I think they're a lot better than one might expect them to be. Also, Toshiro Mifune hardly has any lines because he can't speak English. They wanted him for The Karate Kid. He just could not speak English. So when I watched it, I was wondering, what are they going to do with Mifune? And he just doesn't say a lot.
This is one of these films that's got my name all over it because I love westerns, I love Japanese cinema, I love Toshiro Mifune. I just never got around to it. I do own it, but I say it's easier to get hold of in the UK. You say it's quite tricky, but it's had quite a few releases over here. But I just haven't got around to it. One of these days, I should have done it for this podcast.
Well, we're trying to incentivize you now.
Yes.
What did you get incentivized for, and where are we headed next?
Well, I'm gonna get controversial myself now, and pick a film that I've picked more out of the story behind it than the actual film itself. And apologies if I'm going to bring the tone down too far in this film.
Uh-oh.
But basically, I'm going to Japan for my next film, and it's a film called Apartment Wife Affair in the Afternoon. And so, as you might have gathered from the title, this is an adult film. This is a softcore kind of porno, basically. But what's interesting is the story behind this film, which just I find fascinating, is basically in Japan in the late 60s, the studios are struggling. They're struggling to keep up with the popularity of TV and imported films especially from the US. They were struggling to kind of have that dominance over their local cinemas like they used to. And one of the major studios even went bankrupt at the end of the 60s. But one set of films that was doing quite well were these films called Pink films, Pinkawega. They were low-budget independent films that had a lot of nudity and sex in there, and they were doing quite well. And what happened in the turn of the 70s was Nikatsu, which is one of the biggest studios in Japan, They were known for action films at that time, but they were struggling. They were not making as much money as they used to do. And what they actually did, which I just find crazy when you think about the situation, is they all of a sudden decided to make almost solely porn films. They created their own line called the Roman porno, and their idea was, okay, we're a big studio, we have money, we've got resources, we're going to make high class kind of adult movies. And they made over 1,000 of these over 17 years, and they, as I say, pretty much shifted their production to it. So this is basically, imagine MGM saying, okay, we're struggling at the time being, we're struggling now, let's just make a load of porn movies. It's crazy, but it happened. And so the Apartment Wife, Affair in the Afternoon was the first of these films. So it's quite kind of groundbreaking. But what was also interesting about this movement is that what happened is, obviously, the studio system was very strong in Japan back then. It was kind of you would get a job as an assistant director, you would work for that studio specifically, then you'd be promoted to the director, and you would make whatever the studio kind of wanted you to make. It was quite rigid. But what happened is, obviously, with the move that Nikatsu made, a lot of the old guard directors were like, whoa, I'm not going to make these movies, and they all quit. So what happened then, which is quite interesting, was they hired loads of up-and-coming directors, young directors, hungry directors, and basically they because they were desperate, they said, right, okay, we're going to give you young directors a load of money to make a film, as long as you have some nudity every 5-10 minutes, do what you like. So they just threw money at these people, not loads, they weren't huge budgets, but enough, and they had the studio kind of facilities to do what they like, and they gave these up-and-coming directors the freedom to do what they want, as long as they had a bit of nudity in there. So what happened was, I mean, a lot of these films probably were just generic kind of softcore kind of movies, but they also actually resulted in some really unusual films, very stylistically playful films. And so it's a really bizarre kind of fascinating movement in cinema that it just fascinates me, even if, as I say, a lot of the films are probably just kind of a bit trashy. So yeah, I had to bring this film up. As I say, the film itself, it's a bit of a Belle de Jour type thing of a lonely housewife who's not satisfied with life and ends up becoming a prostitute, and it kind of goes on from there. But it's more the history behind it that I just found fascinating.
That's a very cool thing too, Dave. And I know you mentioned like the PT Violence series was sort of connected to this. Is that?
Oh, no. I didn't. That's something different. It was more it's probably linked to that, but it's more Pink films in general. I think it's
Gotcha.
Pink Awego. It was more. They were more independent kind of softcore movies.
I have seen a few films from the PT Violence series, like Sex and Fury and Delinquent Girl Boss. So
yeah, they're probably linked to it.
Yeah, I'm curious to find out more about this. This looks actually kind of fascinating. Are they like? Because I noticed about those PT Violence films, they actually are shot very well. They have great music scores with them, and I can definitely see how like Tarantino was like influenced by those type of films. It's got this nice little 60s pop sensibility to it, which I absolutely love. So I'm curious if this movie has that too.
No, yeah, definitely. I mean, it's definitely I've seen a couple of them now because they've started to release them over here. They are very well made, as I say. They look really nice. Because, as I say, it was this bigger studio behind them. They put the money into them, and this was kind of before kind of Emmanuel and all this kind of stuff. So some kind of see it as quite influential to that later 70s stuff that would come out elsewhere. So no, yeah, definitely visually impressive. It's cool. It's worth checking some of them out if you're interested in that kind of thing.
Well, yeah, of course. For research, yes.
Dave Anderson, do you have a prurient interest that we can get on the big screen?
Yeah, I think so. All right, my final movie is it's called Le Mans, or as us dumb Americans pronounce it, Le Mans. And it stars Steve McQueen, and it's basically motor porn at its finest. And this is probably my earliest memory of seeing a movie in a theater. And until I found it on DVD decades later, I hardly remembered anything about it except for the racing scenes. There's a good reason for that. It's got Steve McQueen as a participant in France's famous 24-hour endurance race. And aside from a very brief backstory where we learn his character is returning to Le Mans after a crash which resulted in the death of a competitor, almost the entire movie is dedicated to the race itself. You know, lap after lap of Porsches and Ferraris speeding around the track with an occasional crash thrown in. And other than a brief pause in the middle of the film that involves Delaney making peace with the widow of the driver that died in the crash, Le Mans has less actual plot and dialogue than a porn film, but it's also a masterwork in minimalist storytelling. There isn't any dialogue until about 17 minutes in, and McQueen himself doesn't even speak until the 35-minute mark. It's almost all racing, but those scenes are just phenomenal. I became a Steve McQueen fan much later, and I've seen most of his films, but I think Le Mans stands alone among them because I think it might be his most self-indulgent movie. He was really personally invested in this one because he was always into cars and motorcycles and other expensive toys. And here he got to extensively play with them on screen. In fact, he insisted on playing with these toys during the real 24-hour Le Mans in 1970, where a lot of this was shot. They wouldn't let him participate in the race itself, though. But one of the camera cars actually was entered in the race, which is why we got some of the phenomenal shots in this movie. You can't really watch this like a traditional film. It's more of a sensory experience. It's technically pretty amazing. It's still highly regarded by motorsports enthusiasts as the definitive racing movie, and you really feel like you're there on the track with these drivers. Even today, I don't think the racing scenes have been equaled in another movie. It's kind of like watching Frankenheimer's Grand Prix with all the drama cut out. Definitely meant to be seen on the big screen. If I could see it on the big screen one more time, that'd be great. But at this point, I'd be happy with a 4K edition. But it remains a pretty obscure Steve McQueen film. But there is a documentary about the making of the movie called Steve McQueen in Le Mans, which is about its troubled production, because it was a very troubled production. John Sturges was once attached to direct it, and I guess he quit after a few weeks. One guy lost his leg during the filming of it, McQueen eventually lost creative control of the film. It's still an enjoyable film, taken as pure sensation.
Yeah, I heard about the Grand Prix movie, but not about this one. Le Mans? What?
Le Mans, yeah.
Okay, very cool. Yeah.
I have no knowledge of the upcoming film, but it sounds very familiar. F1 is coming out this summer. That's the Brad Pitt movie.
Oh, Brad Pitt, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what the circumstances are, but it looks to me like it's going to be very similar. We're going to get 90% of the film is going to be car racing footage. Howard, your best film? Is that where we are? Or
Best
at
film.
Least, all right.
I think we are.
Last one.
Yeah.
Well, I probably is a film that most people have seen, but maybe not. It is The Last Picture Show.
Oh, yeah.
This is a movie I've seen many, many times. We did it on Pop Art. We paired it with, oh gosh, great. What's the movie about teenagers at the mall?
All right.
Best Lives at Ridgemont High?
Yes, Fast Times. We paired it with Fast Times at Ridgemont High. About a year in the life of seniors in high school. And it's Peter Bogdanovich's beautifully nostalgic look at a group of teens who are facing no real futures at all because they live in this really small town and everything is dying. It's one of those films that showcased a number of new or relative new people who became much bigger, like Joseph Bottoms, Jeff Bridges, Sybil Shepherd, Eileen Brennan, Ellen Burstyn, and Oscar winners, Cloris Leachman, and that old pro Ben Johnson, who didn't want to do the movie until Bogdanovich got John Ford to get him to do it. I think it's quite possibly Bogdanovich's best film. I find it deeply affecting. There was a sequel to it, and in some ways I'd say I'd avoid the sequel because the sequel takes place in the same town, the same characters, but there's now an oil boom, so the town is doing really well, or beginning to, and I'm going, well, then what was the point of doing this film about a town that's just dying out and symbolized by the the movie theater shutting down. If you're just going to say, oh, well, we weren't serious about that, there's going to be no album, nothing to worry about. But at any rate, I love the film.
Yeah. I like this movie. I prefer Peter Bogdanavic's other black and white film, Paper Moon, a little bit more than this, but this is still a good one. I also really like What's Up, Doc, as well.
Oh yeah.
Oh, well, he had a string right there of those
Yeah.
films. I think a 3 or 4 year stretch where he had big hit after big hit after big hit. It took at long last love for his career to take the downturn.
Well, what happened is he didn't learn the lesson. Don't sleep with your leading lady. And yes, he never really recovered from the movies he made after that didn't do well at the box office.
But this is a terrific picture, and I've seen it many times, and I did see it in a theater. I saw it at the Monterey Theater at the corner of Garfield and Hellman in Monterey Park. I can remember
Nice.
exactly where I sat, and I'm trying to remember what I think I saw it on a double bill with Easy Rider.
So, Howard, quick question: is the sequel in black and white as well, or
No.
Okay.
No, it's in color. And it also has this funny thing. Well, Sybil Shepherd shows up. She hasn't lived in the town since she left it, and I think this takes place to the year 1954. And she comes upon Jeff Bridges, and she has no idea who he is.
Oh.
I'm going, oh, come on. Your memory isn't that bad. It's the guy you lost your virginity to. Come on.
Is the sequel called Second to the Last Picture Show?
It's Texasville, isn't it?
Texasville, yeah.
Texasville. I mean, it's not their fault. I think Larry McMurtry wrote the book, so they just adapted the book.
Yeah, if there's a sequel in the book, there's a book sequel, somebody's going to say, well, we should have a movie too.
Of course.
Todd, you're up.
For my last one, I'm going to go with what may be one of the funniest movies I think I've ever seen. It's the directing debut of Elaine May, A New Leaf, which she stars in with Walter Matthau. I mean, this is the movie you should think of when you hear the name Elaine May. Rather than Ishtar. Not that Ishtar gets a bad rap. I'm not that down on Ishtar, But this movie is just plain hilarious. It's just a delightfully absurd comedy. You've got Walter Matthau playing a millionaire who has squandered his trust fund, and so he must quickly marry a rich woman to keep his extravagant lifestyle going, and that ends up being Elaine May as this really just bizarre, quirky character. This is one of my favorites from Matthau. His dry delivery is just perfect in this, but Elaine May is the true star of this piece. I mean, she's just one of the most sweetly lovable, awkward characters ever to grace the screen. I mean, as an audience member, you fall in love with her before Matthau does. And in all seriousness, these two are delivering what may be two of the best comedic performances ever in one movie. It's got a really comedically intricate script paired with skillful direction from Elaine May. This is just a real treat. I was kind of trying to refresh myself earlier this morning before the recording, putting on the trailer, and I was laughing out loud at the trailer. This is a must-see comedy.
So, Todd, I have some good news for you. So, in May, the Trilon Cinema is doing a double feature of Elaine May movies with the Heartbreak Kid and A New Leaf, and they're showing A New Leaf in 35 millimeter.
Nice. And Heartbreak Kid's another one that's really hard to find.
Hard to find, yeah. That one's tough.
So I might have to go see those.
I saw this movie 2 years ago when we were doing Mikey and Nikki as movie of the month, and I decided I'd see all the rest of Elaine May's directorial output, and I enjoyed it quite a bit. I thought it was very good, and I think I might have enjoyed talking about A New Leaf a little bit more than talking about Mikey and Nikki, but that's neither here nor there.
Well, two very different movies.
Yeah, very different, very different.
I've seen Mikey and Nikki. I don't believe I've seen A New Leaf, but if it's going to be playing in theaters, I might go watch this.
Well, I'll tell you what, if A New Leaf and Heartbreak Kid, if they added Ishtar as a triple feature on the big screen, I'd go. I think I'd drive up to Minnesota for you.
They don't have Ishtar there. That'll come at another time. I'm sorry about that.
Vern, what's the controversial movie that you're going to finish off on?
Right, so to recap my list of the most controversial films of 1971, at number 5 I had Harold and Maude. Number 4, Dirty Harry. Number 3, The Devils. Number 2, A Clockwork Orange. And my number 1 controversial film of 1971 is Straw Dogs. And here's what I wrote. And for listeners out there, watchers, here's a spoiler warning for the movie. So if you've never seen Straw Dogs before, or you don't want spoilers, skip ahead a few minutes while I talk here. So the moment that a lot of people will mention is the most controversial is the rape scene. To give a bit of context, Amy, played by Susan George, and David, played by Justin Hoffman, are bothered by the violence in New York City so much that they move to her hometown, a small English countryside. There we meet Susan's ex-boyfriend, Charlie, played by Del Henney, who still has feelings for her. Him and his friends see David as being meek and weak, and so does Susan. There are moments David should stand up to the man, but he is too afraid to. He doesn't want to do any violence. When Susan is raped by Charlie, it looks like she is enjoying it, and people are taking it that it's the director's glorifying rape. I don't think she is, but keep in mind that before this attack happens, she's been treated badly and emotionally by David prior, and is going through a lot of emotions, and it shows. It's a very kind of like complex movie with different things happening there, and the main villain that you see in this movie actually is David, Dustin Hoffman's character, and that's what Sam Peckinpah is trying to put out there, that it's actually him as the main villain. And yeah, I do love this movie. Avoid the remake and whatnot, but I do think that this is one of Sam Peckinpah's great movies he did, even more than The Wild Bunch.
Well, it was definitely controversial, and I think you picked out the scene that probably brings out most of the controversy. It is a complex kind of relationship that's going on there between her and her ex-boyfriend and the other guys that are involved. It's sort of like there is a romantic clench that turns into an assault that turns into a gang rape, basically.
Yeah.
And faulting her for it is victim blaming at the max. And although David as a character is kind of a meek, I didn't find him as being unreasonable most of the time, just kind of obstinate, because he's just he's certainly different than everybody else in the neighborhood. Everybody else in the neighborhood is the native of the area, and he's an outsider, and being an outsider, he responds as an outsider for the most part. And when we get to the violence at the end, I'm afraid being a fan of Dirty Harry, I'm happy to have the violence come out the way it does.
Yeah, that's fair too. But also, Richard, David in this movie, he treats the first character as like this little kid. He just doesn't give her the respect and everything too. And I'm sure they got together just for her good looks, because she's beautiful in this movie too.
And she went after him because of his good looks too.
Yeah. Well, I'm pretty sure it had to be like, I thought maybe it was like a teacher-student type relationship, like a teacher's assistant type of thing there too. So he doesn't seem to have. He kind of sees her as an object, as well as the other men do too. So there's a lot of like complex things. Check out the Criterion Blu-ray or DVD, because there's a great commentary track on there, and there's a great little section that talks about the controversial movie, The Moment, because a lot of people confuse this movie as being like misogynistic and mean on women, and I don't necessarily see it that way, but I can sort of grasp different things. And I love movies where people can debate on topics and themes about it, and how some people react to a movie is not going to be the same way that other people react to it, but it's very well acted. And I like the fact too that the attack and rape scene is not exploitive. It's not super exploitive. It doesn't focus on, her body so much. It focuses mostly on her face and the reactions she has while going on
And
through
it's
this.
plenty unpleasant.
It's unpleasant too.
Yeah.
I'm not arguing with that.
It's
but
not really
they don't,
lascivious. It's uncomfortable.
They don't sexualize it.
Yeah.
Is what I mean.
There you go. That's probably a good way of describing it. Well, my last film is here because Dave Anderson picked the Anderson tapes, and I was down to two choices when it came to Sean Connery films, and I said I'll talk about the Anderson tapes, but since we've already covered that, I've defaulted to the other Sean Connery film, which works out well for me because it's a James Bond film. It's Diamonds Are Forever, which is to me one of the lesser James Bond films.
The song that Doja Cat did. Okay, I know that.
Yeah, definitive version too.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I'm sorry, you're speaking a different language than me. I have no idea what you were referring to. Did this artist named Doja Cat do a cover of Diamonds Are Forever?
On the Oscars,
yes, he did.
Oh, geez. Okay. Oh,
yeah,
that was just recently. I guess I did see it. Because I did watch the Oscars this year. I just didn't remember. I'm sorry. I'm not familiar with Dave knows her because she's a cat. I on the other hand, have no clue.
I know her because of 7th grade students.
I wanted that sequence to go on.
Yeah.
I said, aren't there some other James Bond songs? Couldn't we keep on singing?
Couldn't we do these? Yes.
Yeah.
Diamonds Are Forever, like I said, it's one of the lesser films. It's Sean Connery returned after having left the series, being induced to do it by a whole bunch of money that he then turned around and donated to Scottish Independence Fund. But there are things in the film that I think are worth while. And I did a series years ago when we were getting ready. I think it was for Spectre. My 007 favorite things about every James Bond film. So I will just give you a quick recap of those. The theme song here is great. It's the One More from Shirley Bassey, and I think it's beautiful. I like Winton Kidd, the hired killers, the secondary henchmen.
Two of my favorite henchmen in the whole Bond series.
They're pretty good, and they have some clever dialogue between themselves. This film is loaded with entendres that I didn't get when I saw it when I was 13, but I've enjoyed immensely since then. For example, weren't you a blonde when I came in? I tend to notice little things like that. Which do you prefer? Well, as long as the collars and the cuffs match. And I'm going, I didn't get that joke until I was in my 30s. And then, I'm Plenty O'Toole, named after your father, perhaps. There's a famous goof in the car chase where the Mustang enters into a narrow section on its edge to escape in the chase, and it comes out in the opposite direction, upside, on its other side. So that's kind of strange. I liked Willard White being played by Jimmy Dean, the singer and Sausage King. I enjoyed that, and it's a nice take on the Howard Hughes thing that was going on at the time. I appreciated that. This is one of my favorite posters of James Bond films. It was one I saw in the entryway of the theater that was down the street from us. I saw that and said, I am absolutely seeing this movie. This is a gorgeous looking poster, and it's one that should induce people to come and see the movie. So because the Andersons tapes got taken, Diamonds Are Forever makes my list of films for 1971 for you guys.
Sweet.
This one's actually one of my earliest memories of a Bond film, because I can remember being a young kid. It was probably like its broadcast debut or something like that, and I just clearly remember the scene with Bond in the crematorium. Stuck in the coffin.
Oh yeah.
That's just etched in my memory as a little kid.
And I don't think they've updated Circus Circus since they made the movie, so it looks very much the same. And my understanding is Circus Circus is coming down soon, so that is.
I remember Circus Circus. They had those animatronic creatures that played the instruments.
Yeah.
That's what my Circus Circus had.
That's a little bit different, You're thinking.
Yeah, the arcade games and
the
like
Chipmunks,
the Target Gorilla. playing the banjo and the bear playing the organ. Yeah, it was good stuff.
All right, David, you get one more country and one more film.
Okay, well, after being quite adult with my last film, I'm going to go with a kids' film this time. I'm heading to Denmark for my final film, and I'm going to talk about, this is another short one, it's only just over 40 minutes, and this is a film called Benny's Bathtub. So in Benny's Bathtub, there's a young boy called Benny, and his dad's working, his mum just constantly having a go at him and telling him to scrub up and get in the bath and all this kind of stuff, but he just wants to have fun. But what he brings home a tadpole, and his mum's like, oh, that's disgusting, flush it down the toilet. But he doesn't want to, but he brings it into the bathtub, and the tadpole starts talking to him and says, come down the plug hole in the bathtub, and I will come down the plug in the bathtub, and I'll show you my world. So he goes through the plug in the bath, and he goes into this underwater paradise, and it just goes on from there. And it's a very simple story. It's just this boy going around this underwater world, and seeing all these crazy kind of characters down there. And it's an absolute joy, this film. It's packed full of really cool songs. They're in Danish, but they're by a mixture of kind of like quite big Danish jazz artists and also some big Danish pop and rock artists. There's a lot of humour in there. You've got these, I particularly enjoyed, there's these two skeleton pirates who are arguing over whose mum is toughest, and they have this song about it, and the animations of showing these super tough mums doing all these crazy things. It's just, yeah, as I say, it's a sheer joy. It's very psychedelic. As I say, it's 1971, you might expect, but really bold colours, like crazy. As I say, the characters are quite simple, but the animations are fairly quite exaggerated and interesting. Yeah, and it's very playful, and it's just a joy. Although I say kiddie friendly, it's actually, although it's not really known, it's very little known outside of Denmark, but in Denmark it was chosen as one of these kind of it was chosen as one of the country's cultural canon, alongside like films from Carl Dreyer and like the works of Hans Christian Andersen, and they picked this film among them. It's so loved in that country, and yeah, it's an absolute treat. It is available. I actually imported a US Blu-ray for this, but it is available from Deaf Crocodile Films. And it's well worth checking out. I'd say it's very short, which some people might not think they're getting value for money, but it's a whole lot of fun, and yeah, you should definitely check it out.
So Dave, it looks like you can stream it through Hoopla here in the US, which is the free service you can use with your library card.
Yeah. Oh, there's one thing I started to say and I think it didn't finish. Although it is very kiddie friendly, there's one aspect that probably is more that maybe some other countries it might not be quite as au fait with, is although it's very kiddie friendly, there's a scene where they meet some mermaids, and the mermaids are topless. So as long as you don't mind showing your kids some bouncing animated mermaid boobs, then you're okay.
So Dave, I take that this is not the prequel to Benny's Video from Michael Haneke.
No, quite a different film, I think.
Okay, fair enough. All right.
So along with Apartment Wife Affair in the afternoon, we've got Benny's Bathtub and plenty of bouncing boobies, apparently.
Yeah, and Twins of Evil.
And Twins of Evil.
Twins of Evil.
You did have a theme going on here that didn't have anything to do with the tour around the world. What the heck?
Sorry, guys, for bringing
That's okay.
down this week.
Hey,
perfect double D feature.
Like the man said, there aren't any hard women, only soft men. We're going to take a quick break here to hear from a fellow Lamb Podcasting Network show, and then we'll be back for our exit question of the week.
Cinema Recall is available everywhere you find great podcasts.
The hell was that?
It's our voice promo guy.
Follow them on Facebook and Instagram under Cinema Recall Podcast, and on Twitter at Cinema_Recall.
Vern, can we afford to have a voiceover guy?
We can't afford not to. Used to be a voice guy for movie trailers, but now he just follows me around and gives me movie trailer narration.
That's really sad.
What? Now we're giving him purpose in life. He now has a reason to go on.
Check out past episodes at cinemarecall.net. Promise it's fun!
Well, it's time for the exit question of the week. Thanks for sticking around long enough to hear that. We had a whole bunch of films that we talked about. And, some of those films people, say were controversial. Some of them might be a little obscure. The exit question this week is pretty straightforward. What movie do you defend that everyone else seems to hate? In other words, what's your most contrary view of a film? And I'm happy to listen to anybody who wants to volunteer first, but if you don't volunteer, I'll randomly call on somebody.
Well, I'll go ahead and do it because I really couldn't exactly come up with something that fit that.
Okay.
Usually the things that I really like and really defend, enough people like it. I'm not sure there is one, but I will tell sort of an anecdotal story that in 2013, I went to the AFI Film Fest with a couple of friends, and we saw a movie, Stranger by the Lake, by Alan Garrity. And from the very moment it began, because it begins in this area with a lot of trees and there's wind blowing, I'm going, there's something special here. It's a very sexually frank movie. I'm not joking. You see everything, and it's a gay film, and it's you see every aspect of sex just about. And when we came out of it, my two friends were just thought, oh, this is the worst thing I've ever seen. And they asked me what I thought, and I said, it's one of the best films of the year. And they just couldn't believe it. Well, a few weeks later, it opened at a theater, and I went with two other friends to see it. And when we came out, they just thought, this is one of the worst films they've ever seen. They didn't like it. In my defense, it was on a huge number of critics' top 10 list, and it was well respected by the public. So in many ways, I don't have to defend it because, and you can see more of his films now on Criterion because they're having a section dedicated to him. The other interesting thing about it is that I went on Twitter and I said something about how sexually frank it was, and someone said, well, did they use basically real dicks because they had erection scenes? And I said, well, yes, they did, though they might have used a stunt cock instead of the actor's real dick. Yeah. And the actor from the film responded to my Twitter and said, no, there were no stunt cocks. That
was not a stand-in. That was a stand-up.
Yes.
Okay.
All right.
Well, damn.
Who's next?
I can go next.
Okay, Dave.
My choice is Apollo 18. It's a found footage film, which is a genre I typically can't stand. And a lot of people, even people who like this genre, hated this one, which in a nutshell is about killer moon rocks. A lot of the common criticisms are that it's slow and boring, and I can see why they think that, because there's a lot of extended scenes where the camera doesn't move and almost nothing seems to be happening. But I like the pacing, and I like the use of found footage, and I really felt like I was watching actual video footage from the early 70s. And I even enjoyed the stupid premise, and great ending, too.
Well, I haven't seen that, but I'm looking forward to catching up with it. I've heard people not recommend it, but talk about it. So I understand that maybe it doesn't have a great reputation, but is it a horror film?
I would classify it as sci-fi horror, yeah.
Roughly,
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, does somebody want to go next?
All right, I'll go ahead.
Well, I'll go, sure.
Go ahead.
I just went with the first thing that came to my mind. I went to my favorite movie year, which is 1984. And no, I'm not going to say Dune, though I do say I think Dune gets a bad rap, too. No, I'm going to go with the other one from the same month. But I love Supergirl. I'm sorry, but I love Supergirl.
I'm sorry, too.
You do.
I admit that it's not a very good movie. I admit all the problems that people have with it, but I think there's still something just extremely charming about it. And a lot of that I kind of put all on the shoulders of Helen Slater. I think she does a great job, giving a performance that, it's kind of like, well, what do I have to lose? She was an unknown. This is her first role, and she just gives it all that she's got, and I just think makes for a very appealing, very charming lead in the film. The scene where she kind of first arrives on Earth and is discovering her powers and that she can fly and all this stuff, it's just so lovely. And so yeah, for all the hamming it up that you get out of people like Faye Dunaway and Peter O'Toole and Mia Farrow and Peter Cook, Helen Slater still makes this one a winner for me.
And her performance is sort of like she's influenced a lot of other adaptations of that character, in my opinion. Like, that's the premiere version of Supergirl, is Helen Slater as Supergirl, for me.
She is clearly the best thing about that movie. But
yeah,
unfortunately for me, she's the only thing about that movie that's any good. So your opinion is a contrary opinion. It's certainly contrary to my point of view on it anyway. And I think a lot of other people are going to be on my side rather than yours. But believe me, when I get to mine, I will be by myself. I know it.
All right. Well, I'll jump in your nest. And my pick is a movie that I just recently saw in IMAX this week. It was a former Lamb Movie of the Month winner, and I'm doing Spring Breakers as a controversial pick. And I love this movie. Didn't like it the first time I saw it, and then watched it again. And more I watch it, it is a pop poetry music video masterpiece from Harmony Korine. I love the cinematography from Benoit Debie. The cast is great with Selena Gomez, Vanessa Hudgens, and James Franco. I love the hip-hop use of sampling that Harmony Korine does in this. It doesn't necessarily have a plot. It has a plot, but a very thin plot, and it's just a movie that I just love the colors and visuals of it. It only has like, what do you call it here, 68% on Rotten Tomatoes and 2.8 on Letterboxd, 63 on Metacritic. So a lot of people think of this movie as being like just trash and trashploitation, but I don't. Spring Break forever. Love it.
Well, my memory of it is that a lot of people liked this movie, and when I finally saw it, I did not like it at all. So you're at least contrary to my point of view, but
listen to the episode too. I totally agree there, Todd, with your thought that you're not liking it, because I know that Jake Lewitt was not a fan of the movie too when we recorded the episode. I posted the episode on YouTube. On our YouTube channel for Cinema Recall, so go check that out. There's a lot of great discussion about that movie on there.
All right, good deal.
Yeah, I remember watching it, and I thought it was kind of interesting, and it reached this point where they're dancing with the guns on the pier, and all this stuff is going on. I thought to myself, oh, maybe it's going to go somewhere. Maybe it's going to do it, and it didn't do it. It almost got there for me, but it didn't.
That sequence where they're dancing to Britney Spears every time, that montage, oh, great stuff. Love it. But I get why people don't like the movie too, so I'm not dismissing people's thoughts on it. I just absolutely, like, more I watch it, the more I enjoy the randomness and yeah.
David Brooke, what have you got for your contrary film?
Well, I was going to I was struggling a bit at first to think of something, but then I realized I was having a conversation about the very thing with Jay Cluett the other day, and this is not a film I adore, but I just think it's maybe got a bit more flack than it deserves, and that's Piranha 2. It's got a terrible reputation, especially.
James Cameron's Piranha 2, right?
Because it's James Cameron's first film. He's disowned it. He keeps saying, someone else came in and reshot bits and changed the edit, and it's not a great movie, but you know what? It's really not that bad. It's silly. It's really silly. You've got the piranha sprouting wings and flying, and the effects are pretty bad. But the actual characters and the performances, for a cheesy B movie, are not that bad at all. In fact, I go as far as to say the human element is stronger than in some of Cameron's later films. Maybe it's not. And it's paced pretty well. It's fun. It's just a decent low budget. As long as you realise it's a B movie and take it as a B movie, it is not bad at all. So I always stand up for that, because it gets a lot of flack.
And therefore, I also stand up for Piranha, double D as well in the.
Oh yeah.
Oh.
That's
3 double D.
That's right, 3 double D. 3. That's right.
That is one that Jay says is one of the worst movies he's ever seen. Because I actually just recorded for Jay's show for Deep Blue Sea, the podcast, as well, doing the first Piranha, doing Joe Dante's
that's what
Piranha.
brought the conversation. Yeah.
So yeah.
All right, well, I'm ready to get run over by everybody here because this is a film that people hate on, and I don't care that you hate on it. I enjoy the hell out of this film. I love the artists that have committed to it. I admire the director who made an effort. I understand what they were going for, and I appreciated it. Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band.
I knew you were going to say that, Richard, and I'm in your camp as well.
All right,
I
good
have
for
fun
you.
with this one.
Good for you. It is. I was going to say universally loathed, but apparently Todd and I are over here in a bucket by ourselves. There are other people, maybe, but this is a film that I think is mostly misunderstood. It is a comic version of a songbook musical, and they're just trying to find a way to get the music on screen, tell a silly story to go along with it. By the way, the story is based on a stage play that somebody created before they created the movie. So it's not even an original screenplay per se. It's based on material from another medium. And the songs, I don't see how you go wrong with the Beatles songs, and the interpretations of the Beatles songs are excellent. Got to Get You Into My Life from Earth, Wind and Fire is terrific. Aerosmith's version of Come Together is dynamite. I think that Robin Gibb's version of Oh Darlin' is smokin', and anybody who says differently doesn't know what the hell they're talking about. That's a really good song and a really good version of it. And then the other songs that go along, they're fun, and they visualize a lot of things that are fun to look at, and it's silly, and it's making fun of their own record company. It came from RSO Studios, and they're mocking RSO Studios. So and the director Michael Schultz did a ton of movies in the 70s that I like: Car Wash, Greased Lightning, Which Way Is Up, Carbon Copy, and he's a pretty solid director. I don't think he's more of his time, of course, at that particular time, and I just think that people are missing the point here, that they were just trying to have some fun, and nobody apparently wanted to have any fun.
So, Richard, I've only seen Across the Universe movie with that adaptation of Beatles songs, and I wasn't a fan of that movie, so while I liked this one more.
No,
I don't think you will.
Not.
I don't think you will.
Okay.
I don't. I mean, it's hard to say, Verb, because this one's just so bizarre. I mean, I think Across the Universe is trying to be a bit more
Serious.
classy, a bit more legit, whereas this one is just any nutty idea, it's there, which I think is kind of more up your alley type of thing.
Sure.
But I mean, it's interesting, Richard, your movie selection and my movie selection are ones that I did an article ages ago. This is over 10 years ago for another blog that was bad movies I love, and Supergirl was listed there, and Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band was listed there. Also one that they announced this week, a Criterion release of The Wiz with Diana Ross. Also I included in that article. I was like, really? I mean, there are things about The Wiz I appreciate, but that's not a good movie, and Criterion's putting it out. Wow.
Well, they did put out Armageddon at one time.
But anyway, sometimes bad movies are fun. So.
Well, we've had fun on this show talking about the year 1971 and a whole variety of movies. We had an overlap a couple of times, but for the most part, people found some very different films to visit. And hopefully, those of you who are listening will enjoy some of the films that we came up with here. I want to thank my guests and give them a chance to promote anything that they think is worth turning your eyes and ears to. Dave Anderson, let's go with you first. You got something at the Free Kittens Movie Guide that everybody can look at?
Just keep checking out my Blu-ray and 4K reviews as they come to me.
That's a good thing to do. I'm always looking to buy something. That's the problem. I start reading a review and I'm going, now I should add this to my collection. Damn. Todd, what's going on the Forgotten Filmcast?
Well, we've always got new episodes happening there. In the next day or two, I'll be posting an episode. Matt Poirier was with me. We shifted gears very quickly and did a Wings Hauser movie because he just passed away. So we did L.A. Bounty, starring Sybil Danning and Wings Hauser. So that'll be coming this week. And then in just a couple hours, I'll be recording the next episode with Simon Appleton, where we're going to jump forward 2 years from 71 to 73 and do The Last American Hero with Jeff Bridges.
Vern, how about you?
All right, well, over at Cinema Recall, I've got reviews of both Novocaine and The Day the Earth Blew Up, a Looney Tunes movie, over on our website, cinemarecall.net. And for podcasts, I did a combination episodes with my buddy Keely from Once Over with Keely, talking about the movie Society, played the first part of that discussion. And I also posted the Lambcast discussion on Possession, where we did that for the movie of the month, only the first part, and then I post a link for you to hear the full episode on YouTube.
Nice. Yes, watch the whole episode on YouTube. We could use some more views on that one.
Can I just say too, I want to encourage people, go see The Day the Earth Blew Up. I mean, it does Looney Tunes right. So it's the best Looney Tunes feature film in a long, long time.
Excellent.
Yeah, fun time.
Yeah, and it's got a release that is almost invisible.
Mm-hmm.
And Ketchup Entertainment is possibly going to do that Acme versus Wile E.
Coyote versus Acme. Yeah,
we'll keep our fingers crossed on that one. Howard, what's on Pop Art?
Well, still the most recent one up is the one with you for Valentine's Day, music and lyrics, and Once, two romantic films about songwriters. The one I'm working on now and I've just recorded is Jason Soto, where we're doing Foul Play and The Man Who Knew Too Much, which are two films about people becoming involved in a planned assassination.
Good. Those are both fun films, too. David Brooke, I know you've got a million videos that you have to review. You want to pick out one or two to tell us about?
I've been really busy churning out reviews. Recently I did Beyond Justice, aka Guardian Angel, so a PM Entertainment classic. Who Can Kill a Child? Very brutal kind of horror movie. Nice the Felines, which is one of the rope and porno line that I was talking about earlier. And A Tale of Sorrow and Sadness. It says in Suzuki, one of his later films. Also, I just wanted to point out something that I didn't post myself, but Andy Goulding has done on the site, and that is he does a lot of these ranked lists where he runs through like the entire work of a particular director and things like that, and covers them in detail. And he's recently posted one for Don Bluth, and he's also done a 2-part epic about all the films of Douglas Sirk. So they're well worth looking at on the site. So yeah, blueprintreview.co.uk.
Well, you'll keep Todd entertained for a while.
I should mention that Adam Golding is going to be my next guest. We just haven't decided what movies yet.
Oh, nice. Cool, yeah.
David, the Beyond Justice that you did, is this the Rutger Hauer one?
No, it's the Cynthia Rothrock one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think it's better known as Guardian Angel.
Oh, good.
I think I've heard about that Guardian Angel. And How to Kill a Child, that's a movie that I've been trying to find, and I've never been able to find it anywhere, but I've been curious to watch that one.
Well, it's weirdly, the copy I reviewed is it's a Swiss label who I managed to talk into sending me a few discs. They're called Focus Media, and they're releasing some pretty cool stuff that's hard to get in the UK. So, yeah, try and dig those out if you can.
Oh, very cool.
All right, and I'm going to force myself to write the reviews. I've fallen behind easily in the last couple of months, just trying to catch up on things, and I think, well, do I really need to do that? Yes, I do, because I saw it in a theater, and if I say it on the Lambcast, then I have to do a review. Black Bag, I saw last week, and I'll write a review on that. Novocaine, I wrote the review. I liked Novocaine quite well. I know Vern wasn't a big fan of it, but I enjoyed it quite a bit. And like I mentioned earlier, this Locked movie with primarily Bill Skarsgård, but Anthony Hopkins shows up, and he's just having way too much fun in the movie. So I'll write reviews of those and get them up at some point or other. Thank you all for coming this week. I hope everybody who's listening enjoyed the show. It's true, my friends. For the latest information on our Soul Challenger, just listen to Kowalski Radio and the Lambcast. Thanks, everybody.
You've been listening to the Lambcast. If you have an idea for a show or would like to join us on the Lambcast, contact us at largeassmovieblogs.com.
Find us on Facebook, just search for Lambcast, or on X, formerly Twitter, at Lambcast. And you can find us on YouTube as well. The Lamb site can be found at largeassmovieblogs.com. We'd also love it if you would leave a review on iTunes.